In a crowded courtroom, everyone laughs when 17-year-old Tyrone Reed, the only black student in the room, stands up to correct the judge's mistake, until the clerk realizes he's right. The laughter dies. The judge's face hardens. Moments later, two officers move toward him. Tyrone's mother screams his name, just as the live stream cuts to black. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The bell at Fairview High School always rang a few seconds too early, slicing through conversations before they could fully begin. The building itself, tall and glassy, looked more like a small corporate office than a public school. Students glided through polished hallways in varsity jackets and expensive sneakers, carrying the kind of confidence that came from generations of belonging. For Malik Henderson, 17 years old and soft-spoken, those same hallways felt like a daily test he didn't sign up for. He walked them quietly, always on the right side, never too fast, never too slow, keeping his eyes low, his earbuds in, and his words to himself. It wasn't fear that silenced him. It was habit. He had learned early that at Fairview, silence was safer than being misunderstood. The teachers said he was bright but reserved. Students said other things. Some whispered. Some joked out loud. He talks funny. He tries too hard. He's not from here, is he? Malik's family had moved from Cleveland's East Side 2 years ago after his mother, Carla Henderson, found steady work as a nurse at the suburban hospital. The move was supposed to mean better schools, safer neighborhoods, and opportunity. But opportunity looked different up close. At Fairview, it came dressed in blazers and trust funds. It lived in neighborhoods where lawns stayed green in every season, and parents donated to academic initiatives. Malik's mother worked 12-hour shifts to keep up with the rent in a modest 2-bedroom apartment that still carried the faint scent of someone else's life before them. In class, Malik rarely spoke, unless called upon. He sat near the back, filling notebook after notebook with sharp, precise thoughts no one ever heard. He loved logic, the quiet order of argument, the power of a well-built case. But he never volunteered answers, not after the first time he tried. It had been freshman year. The teacher had asked about the Great Gatsby, what the green light symbolized. Malik had said softly but clearly, "It's about hope that's always out of reach, like wanting to belong somewhere that doesn't want you." The class had gone quiet for a moment. Then someone laughed. "That's dark, bro." Another voice chimed. "It's just a book." That was the day Malik learned that some truths make people uncomfortable enough to mock. Now in his junior year, he'd mastered invisibility. He nodded when spoken to, smiled when necessary, and disappeared the moment eyes turned away. Until one gray Monday morning, when Mr. Lawson, the social studies teacher, made the announcement. "All right, everyone," he said, his voice bouncing across the room, like a cue for excitement. "The sign-up sheet for this year's National Youth Debate Competition is now open. You know the deal, school regionals, then state, then nationals if you're good enough." A cheer rippled through the class. Debate season was Fairview's pride. Every year, the same students, confident, articulate, overwhelmingly white, dominated the circuit. The trophies lined the glass case, outside the main office, like proof of who excellence belonged to. Malik looked at the list forming on the whiteboard. Chad Whitmore, Ava Pierce, Logan Reed, the usual names. He wasn't surprised. But something in him stirred, quiet but stubborn. All weekend, he'd been rewatching a video on his cracked phone, a championship debate from 2018. A young black girl from Georgia had stood on a stage, dismantling her opponent's logic with calm precision. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. But when she spoke, every voice in that room went still. Malik had watched that clip until the words burned into him. He wanted to know what it felt like to be heard like that, to make silence a choice instead of a sentence. Before he realized what he was doing, Malik's hand had reached for the pen on Mr. Lawson's desk. His fingers trembled slightly as he wrote his name under the others, Malik Henderson. For a second, nothing happened. Then the laughter began. "Wait, Malik," someone said, smirking. "Bro, you sure you want to do that?" "Man, he barely talks in class," another voice added. Mr. Lawson forced a polite chuckle. All right, everyone gets a chance to try. Debate isn't easy, Malik, but good for you." His tone carried that subtle pity, the kind that felt heavier than mockery. Malik didn't respond. He capped the pen, stepped back, and stared at his name on the board like it might vanish any second. By the end of class, whispers trailed behind him in the hallway. He's gonna freeze up. He just wants attention. He's not even in the debate club. That night at home, Malik ate dinner with his mother in silence. The small kitchen smelled of reheated pasta and disinfectant. Carla's scrubs were still wrinkled from her shift. "You're quiet tonight," she said, finally looking up. "I signed up for something at school," he replied. Her tired eyes softened. "Something good, I hope." "The debate competition." The fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Debate?" "Yeah." She smiled slowly, almost cautiously. "That's big, Malik. You always had a way with words, even when you didn't use them." He nodded, but there was uncertainty in his chest. People laughed. "Let them," she said, her voice firm. "If you let every laugh stop you, you'll never start anything." He looked down at his plate, the weight of her words pressing against the bruise of the day. Later that night, Malik sat at his desk under the flickering light of a cheap lamp. The debate topic hadn't even been announced yet, but he started researching articles, videos, arguments, anything that could sharpen him. He knew he wasn't polished. He didn't have a private coach or expensive diction lessons like the others, but he had something else, an unshakable need to prove that silence didn't mean lack of thought. As he read through essays on social justice and education reform, a phrase kept circling in his mind: "They laughed." He wrote it down on a scrap of paper. Then underneath it, "They'll listen." For the first time in a long while, Malik felt something like fire in his chest. But at school, things only grew colder. The laughter turned into quiet dismissals. Teachers congratulated the usual students for representing the school well. No one mentioned Malik's name again. Still, he showed up to every after-school meeting, sitting in the back of the debate club room, watching, learning. He mimicked how the top debaters moved their hands, how they paused between points, how they made even weak arguments sound certain. He took notes on everything: structure, tone, rhythm. No one offered to partner with him. When teams were assigned, his name was left off the list. He was the extra chair in every room. Yet every night, Malik practiced alone. He debated the reflection in his mirror, timing himself on his phone, learning to balance emotion with reason. Sometimes he'd stumble, trip over words, and start again. He trained in the language of persuasion like it was survival. Because in some ways, it was. Fairview wasn't cruel in the obvious ways. It was polite, quiet, the kind of racism that smiled at you while moving you aside. And Malik knew that every good try, every not bad, every maybe next year, carried a message. You don't belong at the table. You're lucky to be in the room. But Malik had stopped wanting to sit at their table. He wanted to build his own. One Friday afternoon, as the winter light faded through the classroom windows, Mr. Lawson posted the official roster for the regional debate qualifiers. Malik scanned the list, heart pounding. His name was missing. Then he saw a small note scribbled at the bottom. Alternates. Malik Henderson. Alternate. Not even a contender. He stared at the word, until it blurred. Behind him, someone snickered. "Guess you'll get your chance, if one of us gets sick." The laughter followed him all the way out the door. That night, Malik didn't practice. He just sat by the window, listening to the wind against the glass. The world outside looked still, uncaring. But somewhere deep inside, something refused to go quiet. He turned on his laptop, opened a new document, and started typing. Not a speech, not a debate, but a declaration. He wrote until his fingers ached, his eyes burning in the blue glow. And when he finished, he leaned back, reading the last line aloud under his breath. "I'm not here to be an alternate." And at that exact moment, his phone buzzed with a new email notification from a sender he didn't recognize. "We need to talk about your participation." The email sat in Malik's inbox like a silent dare. Subject: "We need to talk about your participation." The sender was Mrs. Turner, the head of English and unofficial advisor to the school's debate program. He hesitated before opening it. His mother's old laptop wheezed as the message loaded, the screen flickering faintly in the dim light of his bedroom. "Malik, please stop by my office tomorrow morning before first period. There are some concerns about your entry for the debate competition." Concerns. The word pulsed at him, like an accusation. He stared at it for a long time before closing the laptop. Outside, the hum of the streetlights filled the silence. Inside, his heart thudded in slow, uneasy rhythm. By morning, the whispers had already grown louder. Malik could feel them before he even reached his locker. Heads turned, voices dipped. Someone muttered, Guess he's out already. Another voice laughed softly. Told you he wouldn't last. It was strange how fast news traveled in Fairview High. No one said it to his face, but everyone seemed to know something about him that he didn't. Even Andre, the one person Milik had called a friend, looked uneasy. Andre was tall, broad-shouldered, and known for his easy laugh, the kind of black kid who had learned how to blend in by never standing out. He leaned against the locker beside Malik's and spoke in a low voice.
Man, what's this I hear about you getting called in?
Malik didn't look up. I don't know yet, Andre exhaled, shaking his head. Look, bro, maybe this ain't worth it. You already know how it is here. They got their people for this stuff. No need to give them another reason to. To what? Malik asked quietly. Andre hesitated, then lowered his voice even more. You know, to say you don't fit. Malik closed his locker door. I already know they think that. I'm not doing this for them. Andre gave a half smile, but his eyes said something else. Just don't make it harder for yourself. When Malik walked away, Andre didn't call him back. That silence was louder than any insult. Mrs. Turner's office was on the second floor, its door decorated with motivational quotes and neatly stacked books about rhetoric and logic. She looked up as Malik entered. Her expression was polite, professional, and unreadable. Ah, Malik. Sit down, please. He obeyed, his backpack still on his shoulder. I wanted to talk to you about your registration. She began. You're not officially part of the debate team, correct? No, ma'am. But the sign-up sheet said open to all students. She nodded, folding her hands on the desk. Technically, yes. But usually, participants have prior experience, mentorship, or at least some level of preparation through the club. You haven't attended any of the sessions. I started going last week, Malik said, his tone steady. She smiled, thinly. Yes, I heard. I admire your enthusiasm. But Malik, debate is very competitive. The judges can be demanding. We don't want you to feel overwhelmed. The words were soft, but each one landed like a quiet dismissal. Malik knew that tone. It was the same tone people used when they'd already decided something for you. I can handle it, he said. Mrs. Turner sighed, looking briefly toward the window. It's not just about handling it. It's about presentation, articulation, the ability to think on your feet. These competitions reflect our school's image. There it was, the invisible line drawn in polite language. Our school's image. Malik's jaw tightened. You don't think I can represent the school? That's not what I said, she replied smoothly. But you need to understand that sometimes effort isn't enough in these settings. The other schools, they come prepared. We want our participants to reflect the standard Fairview is known for. Malik met her gaze. What standard is that? For a moment her expression flickered, something like discomfort, quickly masked. Malik, I'm trying to help you. Maybe sit this one out this year, join the club properly, and try again next time. He stood up slowly. I appreciate your advice, ma'am, but I already signed up. I'm not quitting. Mrs. Turner's smile didn't reach her eyes. Then I hope you're ready for what comes with it. By lunch, the story had spread beyond his class. A rumor floated through the cafeteria that Malik had been told to withdraw but refused. Someone claimed he'd talked back to Mrs. Turner. Others said he was pulling the race card. Malik sat alone at the end of a long table, eating in silence while the buzz of voices surrounded him. It wasn't new, he'd sat alone before, but today it felt heavier, like every conversation in the room was a mirror reflecting him as an outsider. When he looked up, he caught a few eyes glancing away quickly. One group laughed too loudly after meeting his gaze. The humiliation wasn't loud, it was casual, practiced, invisible. After school, Malik walked home through the gray Ohio streets, the air heavy with the scent of coming rain. His mother wasn't home yet. Her second shift at the hospital would run past midnight. He warmed leftover pasta and sat by the window, watching headlights slide across the wet pavement. The silence pressed on him. He opened his laptop and pulled up old debate videos on YouTube again. Black students standing behind podiums, voices steady and sharp, dismantling arguments built to underestimate them. Each one carried the same fire in their eyes, the same quiet defiance. He practiced until his throat felt raw. He timed himself, recorded, replayed, criticized. He worked until the noise of the day faded into the rhythm of words and reason. But no matter how many times he practiced, the echoes of laughter from that classroom kept sneaking back in. The next morning, Malik went to the library before class. It was nearly empty, except for two teachers near the back corner by the coffee machine. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but then he heard his name. "Honestly, I don't know why Turner didn't just tell him no," said a familiar voice. It was Mr. Jensen, one of the history teachers. "The kid's bright, sure, but those competitions aren't for charity." The other teacher chuckled softly. "She tried to. He's stubborn. Thinks he's got something to prove." Mr. Jensen laughed quietly. "That's the thing with kids like him. Always trying to prove something." There was a pause, then a sigh. It's not even about race. It's just about fit. There's a certain polish these events expect. Presentation matters. The way you carry yourself. The way you speak. It's not his fault he doesn't have that." The words landed like stones. Malik froze behind a bookshelf. Heart hammering. Kids like him. He stood there for several seconds, the quiet hum of the library surrounding him, every syllable sinking into his chest. When the teachers left, laughing softly about something else, Malik finally moved. He sat down at a table, opened his notebook, and stared at a blank page. He wanted to write something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. His hands were shaking. That night, when his mother came home, Malik was still awake. She dropped her bag by the door, exhausted but smiling. "You're up late again. Studying?" He hesitated before answering. Trying to. She poured herself some water, leaned against the counter, and looked at him. "You okay?" He nodded, then stopped. "Mom, how do you keep going when people make you feel like you don't belong?" Carla studied him carefully. "Did something happen at school?" Malik looked down at his notebook. "Just people talking. Like they already decided what I can and can't do." She came over, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Malik, I've worked in rooms where people looked right through me, smiled to my face, then called me one of the good ones, when they thought I couldn't hear. You know what I learned?" He looked up. "You can't wait for the world to clap for you. You fight for your own applause. And when they stay quiet, that's fine. Silence still counts as them listening." Malik took in her words, his throat tight. "But what if they never do?" She smiled faintly. "Then you clap for yourself," loud enough to shake the room. For the first time that day, he smiled back. When she went to bed, Malik returned to his desk. The weight of what he'd overheard still pressed on him. But something inside had shifted. He wasn't going to walk away. Not now. He opened his laptop again. And for the first time he wrote his speech. Not for the judges, not for the teachers, not even for the school. He wrote it for himself. Each line was a quiet rebellion. Each argument, a defiance of every voice that told him he couldn't. He didn't know what the competition would bring, or whether anyone would even listen. But as he read his first draft aloud, his voice didn't shake. And then, just as he finished, a notification popped up on his screen. "Unknown sender. You don't know who you're up against." Malik's breath caught. He opened the message. It contained only one line. "Watch your back at regionals." The message stayed burned into Malik's mind long after the screen went dark. "Watch your back at regionals." He reread it twice, then 3 times, half expecting the words to vanish or rearrange themselves into a joke. But they didn't. There was no signature, no clue, just the taunting simplicity of threat disguised as advice. For a moment, he considered showing it to his mother, but then imagined the worry on her face, the questions he couldn't answer. So he deleted it. Or thought he did. Sleep didn't come easy that night. His room felt smaller, the air thicker. Each creak of the apartment made him glance toward the door, half expecting another message to appear. By morning the message had faded into background noise, replaced by the rhythmic hum of his determination. If someone was trying to scare him, that meant he was already being noticed. And in a school that had spent 2 years pretending he was invisible, being noticed was progress. The day started like any other. Students gathered in tight clusters near lockers, laughter echoing down the polished corridors. Malik walked through them, quiet, steady. He had grown used to their glances, the way eyes lingered on his skin, then looked past him as if he were furniture that didn't match the room. In English class, Mrs. Turner stood near the whiteboard, her pearls gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She was in her 40s, elegant and deliberate, every word calculated. Her reputation as a mentor carried weight across Fairview High. She had sent students to Ivy League schools. Her recommendation letters were golden tickets. When she smiled, it was the kind of smile that said she believed in fairness on paper. "Before we begin," she said to the class, "I want to acknowledge someone who's taken a bold step this semester. Malik Henderson has signed up for the debate competition. The room turned. Malik froze in his seat. Her voice was smooth, her tone gentle, but something in it glistened. A quiet display, the kind that dressed pity up as praise. I think that's wonderful, Mrs. Turner continued. Debate challenges us to think critically, express ourselves clearly, and engage with opposing ideas. Malik's stepping outside his comfort zone, and that deserves recognition. There was scattered applause, half-hearted, forced. Malik forced a small nod, pretending not to notice the smirks exchanged in the back row.
When class ended, Mrs. Turner gestured for him to stay behind.
Malik, a word? He approached her desk slowly. I hope you didn't mind my little announcement, she said. I just wanted the others to know what you're doing. It's important they see examples of determination. I don't mind, Malik replied carefully. She tilted her head, studying him. You're preparing, I hope? Every night. That's good, you're bright, Malik. Always have been. But remember, debate isn't just about being right. It's about being convincing. He nodded, unsure if that was advice or warning. As he turned to leave, Mrs. Turner added softly, If you ever want feedback, you know where my office is. That afternoon, Malik found himself replaying her words as he walked past the trophy case near the main hall. Gold plates gleamed with names like Whitmore, Pierce, Landon, every one of them a testament to the same unspoken truth. Excellence here looked a certain way. He stopped when he reached the end of the display, an empty space where the next plaque would go. He whispered to himself, maybe this year, it'll say something different. But when he turned the corner, he saw Mrs. Turner talking with Mr. Ellis, the debate coach. Their voices carried faintly through the half-open door of the staff room. He wasn't trying to listen, but his name caught his ear like a tripwire. Malik? Oh, he's bright, Mrs. Turner said, her voice light, polite. He's thoughtful, articulate, a strong writer, but these competitions require polish. You know how it is. Mr. Ellis chuckled. Right. It's about presence, confidence, performance. Exactly, she replied. He's got potential, but he's not there yet. It's just a different kind of environment. These events are competitive. The judges expect a certain standard. There was a pause. Malik could almost hear the careful choice of words hanging in the air, coded and rehearsed. A certain standard, Mr. Ellis repeated. Yes, Mrs. Turner said, and I'd hate for him to feel embarrassed. Sometimes it's kinder to protect them from failure they're not ready for. Malik's heart thudded hard. He stepped back quietly, but his foot caught the corner of a recycling bin. It clattered against the tile, the sound sharp as thunder. The voices stopped. Hello? Mrs. Turner called out, moving toward the door. Malik slipped around the corner just before she opened it. His pulse raced as he walked down the hall, trying to look casual. Behind him, her voice floated faintly. Must have been the janitor. He didn't stop walking until he reached the end of the hall. Then finally, he let himself breathe. That night, the sound of her voice replayed in his head over and over. He's bright, but these competitions require polish. He sat at his desk, his notes scattered around him. His laptop screen glowed softly, the cursor blinking in rhythm with his heartbeat. At first, he tried to work through his usual practice routine, timed speeches, structural breakdowns, but the rhythm was gone. Each line felt hollow, every word, suddenly not enough. He closed his notebook and stared at the ceiling. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator in the next room, and the faint buzz of a streetlight outside. He thought about Mrs. Turner's face, how she smiled while saying things that sliced beneath the skin, how her voice carried a kind of pity disguised as care. For a long time, Malik sat still. Then slowly, he reached for his notebook again. He turned to a fresh page and wrote, in big block letters, "Polish is not truth." Then beneath it, "Truth doesn't need permission to shine." And with that, something in him clicked. He began to rewrite his speech, not the polished version that would please judges, but the version that would challenge them. He stripped away the formal phrasing, the memorized rhythm, the imitation of what good was supposed to sound like. Instead, he wrote from the marrow, from lived experience, from anger sharpened into grace. His argument took shape around a single simple idea. Power doesn't listen to logic until it fears silence. It was raw, it was honest, and it scared him, because for the first time, he wasn't trying to fit in. He was trying to be heard. Hours passed, pages filled. His voice, once hesitant, began to rise in the small apartment as he spoke the words aloud, practicing the cadence of conviction. He could see it now. The stage lights, the audience, the faces waiting to dismiss him, and he could see himself standing taller than they expected. By the time he finished, dawn had crept through the blinds, painting the room in cold gold. Malik leaned back, exhausted, but alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. He closed his notebook carefully, the ink still wet from the last line. The measure of a voice isn't how loud it sounds, but how long it echoes. He didn't know if the judges would applaud or sneer. He didn't know if his words would cost him everything. But for the first time, he didn't care. The next day, Malik handed Mrs. Turner a printed copy of his draft after class. "I rewrote my speech," he said simply. She took it, scanning the first few lines. Her expression stayed neutral, but her eyes flickered briefly, something between surprise and unease. "This is bold," she said finally. "It's honest." She looked up at him, smiling that same careful smile. "Honesty can be risky in competitive settings. I'll take that risk." Mrs. Turner nodded slowly. "All right, Malik. If this is truly what you want to present, I'll respect that." She placed the paper gently on her desk. But as Malik turned to leave, she called after him softly, too softly. "Just remember, not everyone wants the truth." That evening, as Malik walked home, the sky stretched pale and empty above him. For the first time, he felt the edge of something shifting, like the quiet before a storm. At the apartment, he opened his laptop to review his draft again. His heart swelled with a strange mix of pride and fear. But when he reached the second page of his document, he froze. Half his speech was gone. Deleted. In its place, a single sentence had been typed in bold. "You're not ready to be heard." The words glared at him from the screen. "You're not ready to be heard." For several seconds, Malik couldn't breathe. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling. The rest of his speech, 3 pages of carefully chosen words, was gone, deleted, replaced by that single cruel sentence. He checked the file history. Nothing. No autosave. No recovery option. Just emptiness. He sat there, the pale glow of the laptop washing over his face, the quiet hum of the refrigerator echoing in the background. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. The message wasn't just digital. It was personal. For a long time, Malik stared at the blank screen. Anger flickered under his ribs, slow and heavy. Then, quietly, almost deliberately, he reached for his notebook. If they wanted silence, they'd chosen the wrong person. By the time the local qualifiers arrived, Malik had rewritten everything by hand. Not the same speech, but something sharper, stripped of fear, raw with conviction. Every night leading up to the event, he'd rehearsed until dawn, his voice cracking, his throat dry, his hands shaking over the pages. Now, standing behind the podium, in the packed school auditorium, all that preparation felt like a distant memory. The room was colder than he'd imagined. The air carried the faint scent of polish and tension. Banners hung from the walls, Fairview High's colors, deep blue and silver, shimmering under stage lights. The audience was filled with students, parents and a row of judges, seated at a long table, clipboards ready. Malik's heart thudded against his ribs like a warning. He looked across the stage at his opponent, Chad Whitmore, tall, confident, his hair slicked back, his tie perfectly knotted. Chad represented Fairview Academy, the private school across town. His family's name appeared on buildings and scholarships. He smiled like he'd already won. "Good luck," Chad said, his voice smooth, his grin sharp. Malik nodded once. "You too." The debate topic flashed on the screen behind them. Modern education, inequality, myth or reality? It was almost poetic. The moderator's voice rang out. "We'll begin with opening statements. Malik Henderson, representing Fairview High." Malik stepped up to the podium. The microphone loomed too close, amplifying the sound of his breath. For a moment, the words in his notebook blurred. The silence stretched. Someone in the crowd coughed. A girl in the third row whispered, "He's nervous." He tried to start, but his throat caught. The first line, a sentence he'd rehearsed 100 times, slipped away. "Take your time," the moderator said too kindly. The kindness made it worse. Then, in the front row, Malik saw Chad leaning back in his chair, smirking. That smirk burned something awake inside him. Malik lifted his chin, took a steady breath, and started again. "At Fairview High, we like to say education is equal opportunity," he began, his voice quiet but steady. "But opportunity is not equal if the doors open wider for some than others." A murmur rippled through the audience. Malik continued, finding his rhythm. We talk about merit, but who decides what merit looks like? We grade confidence like intelligence, polish like skill, and then we wonder why some voices never rise. Maybe they were never given a microphone. He looked up, eyes sweeping across the judge's table. If equality in education were real, we wouldn't still be debating it. The room had gone still. Even the students who had laughed before were now leaning forward. Chad's turn came next. He smiled, smooth as glass. My opponent speaks passionately, but passion isn't proof. The education system rewards effort. Anyone can succeed if they try hard enough. It's not about race or privilege, it's about work ethic. He gestured toward Malik. Look at him. He's here, isn't he? That's proof the system works. Laughter scattered through the crowd. Malik kept his expression calm, but inside his hands curled into fists. He let Chad finish, every polished word feeding the quiet storm building inside him. When the moderator nodded, Malik stepped forward again. With all due respect, he began, being allowed to stand on the stage isn't the same as being welcomed here. Chad blinked, surprised. Malik's voice grew stronger. You say anyone can succeed if they try hard enough. But that assumes everyone starts from the same line. Tell that to the student who has to work a part-time job instead of paying for private coaching. Tell that to the kid who's told he speaks too differently to win. Tell that to the ones who are seen as exceptions instead of examples. The auditorium was silent now. Even the judges had stopped taking notes. Malik's words sliced through the air like truth uncoiling after years of restraint. When we talk about equality, he said, his voice low and deliberate, we need to stop pretending that silence means satisfaction. Some people stay quiet because they're never asked to speak. He paused, his heart pounding. And some, because they were taught their words don't matter. I'm here to remind you, they do. The audience didn't clap. Not yet. They just sat there caught between discomfort and awe. Then Malik stepped back. Thank you. For a moment, there was nothing, just stillness. Then slowly, applause began to rise. It wasn't thunderous, not yet, but it grew, spreading through the room like a wave breaking against expectation. Even a few of the teachers stood. Malik's breath came out shaky but full. He'd done it, but as he looked toward the judge's table, his eyes caught one man in particular, the senior judge in the middle, Mr. Kessler, adjusting his glasses as he leaned toward another judge. Malik couldn't hear what he said, but the man beside him chuckled lightly and nodded. A moment later, Malik caught it, barely audible, but unmistakable.
He's good, for a kid like him.
The words hit harder than any silence. After the session ended, Malik gathered his notes, trying to hold on to the sense of accomplishment that now felt fragile. He stepped off the stage and into the hallway, where Mrs. Turner stood waiting. You did well, she said, smiling her careful smile. Thank you. Really, Malik, she added, her tone gentle but distant. You held your ground. I didn't expect you to be so assertive. He frowned. Assertive? She nodded. It's good. But just remember, sometimes passion can be mistaken for aggression in competitive settings. Keep it balanced. He wanted to ask her what that meant, but she'd already turned to congratulate another student. Outside, the evening air felt heavy with the smell of rain. Malik walked slowly toward the parking lot, his heart still tangled between pride and ache. He'd done everything right, spoken truth, stood tall, refused to shrink, and yet somehow it still wasn't enough to escape that quiet qualifier for a kid like him. When he reached the sidewalk, his phone buzzed. From unknown subject. Congratulations. He froze, thumb hovering over the screen. The email opened to a single sentence. You made them clap. Now let's see if they'll let you win. Malik's stomach dropped. He looked around. The parking lot was nearly empty, the sky dimming into dusk. Only a few cars remained, headlights flashing briefly as they left. He closed the message and slipped his phone into his pocket, his pulse quickening. Whoever had been watching him wasn't done. That night, the official results were posted online. Malik refreshed the page until his eyes blurred. When the names finally appeared, his heart leapt. He'd advanced to the regional level. He wanted to shout, to wake his mother, to feel proud without hesitation. But as his eyes moved down the page, he noticed something strange. Beside his name, in parentheses, it read, alternate contestant, pending review. He blinked, reading it again. The same phrase he'd seen before, alternate. The word hung in the air like a taunt. He checked Chad's name. No notes, no qualifiers. just primary representative. And under it a small asterisk, linked to a footnote. Evaluation adjusted due to conduct concerns during initial round. Conduct concerns. Malik's blood ran cold. He clicked the link for the official explanation. The page was blank, under administrative review. Someone had filed a report against him. The next morning, Mrs. Turner called him into her office. Her voice was soft but her eyes were wary. "Malik," she began, "there's been a minor issue regarding your participation. It's probably nothing serious, but what kind of issue?" A concern raised by one of the judges. "Something about your tone during the debate. They're reviewing whether it met the competition standards of professionalism."
My tone? Malik repeated. You mean the way I spoke?
She hesitated. "They said it came across as confrontational." He stared at her, disbelief flooding him. "So telling the truth is confrontational now?" "Malik," she said softly, "please don't make this harder than it has to be." He stood up, voice trembling but controlled. "You told me to be honest. You told me to take risks." "I did," she said, "but you also need to understand how your words are received. Some people aren't ready for that kind of directness." He wanted to argue, to shout, to ask who exactly those people were. But the exhaustion in her tone stopped him. As he left her office, he heard her whisper to someone on the phone, her voice low and careful. "Yes, I spoke with him. He'll stay quiet for now." Malik stepped into the hallway, his chest tight, his thoughts spinning. The laughter, the smirks, the pity. It had all built to this moment. He'd stood in the spotlight for 5 minutes and made them listen. And now, behind closed doors, they were deciding how much of that voice they would allow. He took one last look at the hallway that seemed to stretch forever. For the first time, he realized the real debate had never been about equality. It was about permission. And somewhere behind one of those office doors, someone had already decided he didn't deserve it. The word permission echoed in Malik's head, long after he left Mrs. Turner's office. The hallway lights hummed faintly above him, flickering every few seconds. Around him, students laughed, shouted, and brushed past without a second glance. It was strange how easily the world carried on, even when yours was cracking quietly. That evening, he sat by the apartment window, watching rain slide down the glass. The gray of the sky blended with the gray of his thoughts. His phone buzzed twice. Group chat notifications from classmates celebrating Chad's official advancement to regionals. A photo attached showed Chad posing beside the debate trophy. His caption smug and confident. "Next stop regionals, baby. Let's keep Fairview on top." Malik turned off the screen. He couldn't bring himself to respond, couldn't even look at it again. He had done everything right. He had earned his place. And yet someone had decided quietly, bureaucratically, that his place didn't belong to him. The next morning, Malik returned to school early, long before most students arrived. The administration office smelled of printer ink and disinfectant. Behind the counter, the debate coordinator, Ms. Greer, sat scrolling through her computer, glasses perched neatly on her nose. "Good morning," Malik said, voice steady but low. She looked up, her polite smile already in place. "Oh, Malik Henderson, right? What can I do for you?" "I wanted to ask about the regionals list," he said. "There must have been a mistake. My score was higher than 2 of the qualifying participants." Ms. Greer tilted her head, scanning her screen. "Let's see. Henderson, Malik. She clicked a few times. "Ah, yes, here it is. You've been placed on the alternate list." "I know," Malik said carefully. "But I don't understand why. I scored higher than Logan Reed." His rebuttal had point deductions. Ms. Greer's tone didn't change. "Well, scores aren't always the final determinant, Malik. We take other factors into account." "What kind of factors?" She smiled, soft, practiced, and unsettling. "We're looking for a certain image this year." Malik frowned. "An image?" "Yes. The regional competition has media coverage, scholarship sponsors, even local news outlets attending. We want participants who reflect the spirit of the program." He tried to keep his voice calm. Ms. Greer hesitated. Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes did. "You're talented, Malik. Truly. But sometimes representation is more than just words. It's about presentation, poise. You know?" He stood there silent, the meaning sinking in. Presentation, image, poise. The words tasted like poison coated in sugar. "So it's not about how I performed," he said quietly. She clasped her hands together. "You did wonderfully, dear. But these events are competitive. There's always next year. Malik nodded slowly. Thank you for your time. He turned and walked out before she could say another word. The sky outside was heavy and overcast, the kind of gray that swallowed color. Malik walked home in the drizzle, the wind biting against his face. He didn't bother to pull up the paper in his hand. The official notification of his alternate status grew damp, the ink smudging until it was unreadable. By the time he reached the apartment, the page looked more like a bruise than a letter. He sat on the couch staring at it for a long time before finally crumpling it in his fist. When his mother came home, she found him still sitting there. "Malik," she said softly. "What happened?" He looked up, his voice hollow. "They said I didn't fit the image." She frowned, setting her purse down. "What image?" He laughed quietly. But there was no humor in it. The kind that smiles in brochures, I guess. Carla walked over and knelt beside him. "Baby, you did your best. You spoke your truth." "They didn't want my truth," he said, looking away. "They wanted something that looks good next to their logo." For a moment she said nothing. Then she sighed and touched his hand. "Sometimes, Malik, people like us have to work twice as hard to be seen half as much. But you can't let them teach you to disappear." He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the rain outside. "I'm tired of being polite about it." She gave a small, sad smile. That's how change starts. Hours later, after she'd gone to bed, Malik sat at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone. His inbox was filled with messages he didn't want to read. "Sorry, man. That's messed up. You deserved better. Maybe next year." He almost shut it off when an unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A voice crackled through the line. Deep, steady, familiar in a way that caught him off guard. "Is this Malik Henderson?" "Yes.
This is Mr. Daniels.
I used to coach at Ridgeview High, a few towns over. I heard about what happened." Malik sat up straight. "How did you hear?" "News travels fast in the circuit," Mr. Daniels said. "I was one of the senior evaluators, until last year. Still have friends on the inside." Malik hesitated. "Then you know that." "Dropped your score?" "Yes. I also know your rebuttal was the cleanest of the round." Malik's throat tightened. "Then what?" "You already know why," Mr. Daniels interrupted gently. "Some doors don't open without the right key, and the right key doesn't always look like you." Malik was quiet for a long moment. Finally he asked, "So what now? Just accept it?" "That's one option," the older man said. "Or you could learn how to play their game, and beat them at it." Malik frowned. "You mean pretend to be what they want? I mean learn how to make them listen in a language they can't ignore." Daniels replied, "You've got something real. Don't let them bury it. I can help if you want it." Malik hesitated, suspicion flickering. "Why me?" Daniels's voice softened. "Because I've seen too many young brothers give up before the fight even starts. I don't plan on watching another." The line went quiet. Malik's heartbeat filled the silence. Then he said, "When do we start?" Daniels chuckled. "Tomorrow. After school. I'll meet you behind the old rec center on Maple Street. Bring your speech, and bring that fire they tried to dim."
Malik almost smiled. "I'll be there."
When the call ended, the apartment felt different, like the walls had pulled back just enough to let air in again. He glanced at his reflection in the dark window. Tired eyes, damp hair, but something sharper in his stare. They wanted him quiet, polished, predictable. He'd give them something else. The next afternoon, Malik stood outside the abandoned recreation center, his notebook tucked under his arm. The sky was pale and dry, but the wind carried the chill of late winter. A few minutes later, an older man appeared from around the corner, a tall figure with a graying beard, and the kind of posture that spoke of years spent commanding respect. "You made it," Mr. Daniels said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, steady. "Yes, sir," Malik replied. Daniels looked him over, nodding slightly. "Good. First rule of this world, they'll underestimate you before you even speak. Your job isn't to prove them wrong. It's to make them regret assuming." He gestured to a small bench beneath the overhang. "Let's hear what you've got." Malik opened his notebook, his hands trembling just slightly. He read his opening lines aloud, the same words that had once made an auditorium fall silent. When he finished, Daniels didn't speak immediately. He just studied him, his expression unreadable. Finally he said, "You've got power, Malik, but power without control scares people. You need to learn when to let silence do the talking." Malik frowned. "Silence." Daniels nodded. "They're not afraid of noise. They're afraid of truth that lingers after it's spoken." Malik wrote that down. underlining it twice. Daniels smiled faintly. I can work with you. But you need to know once you start pushing back, they'll push harder.
I'm ready, Malik said.
Daniels' eyes softened with something like pride. Then let's begin. As the wind rustled through the empty court behind them, Malik felt the weight of defeat begin to shift. Not gone, but transforming. And he didn't notice, as they began their session, the black car idling at the end of the street. Inside, a woman in glasses sat watching them through the windshield. Ms. Greer. She lifted her phone and made a quiet call. Yes, she said. He's meeting with someone. No, I don't think he plans to stay silent. The next day after school, Malik took the long way home. He didn't want to be seen leaving campus with his debate notebook. The eyes that followed him lately carried more suspicion than curiosity. Every corner of Fairview felt smaller now, its hallways like tunnels closing in around him, its teachers' smiles thinner than before. The secret meeting with Mr. Daniels the night before still replayed in his head. The man's calm voice, his sharp eyes, his warning. Once you start pushing back, they'll push harder. He hadn't realized how literal those words would feel until he saw the black sedan parked again outside the school gates. The same car from the previous day, the same tinted windows. For a moment, Malik stood frozen on the sidewalk, pretending to scroll through his phone. When the car didn't move, he turned the corner and quickened his pace toward home. By the time he reached his apartment complex, the sedan was gone, but the unease lingered, like a shadow that had learned his name. That evening, Malik's garage became his new classroom. It wasn't much a narrow, dim space with cracked concrete floors, a few stacked boxes, and a single hanging bulb that flickered like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive. The air smelled faintly of oil and rust. Mr. Daniels stood by the door, a thermos of coffee in his hand, his presence filling the room with quiet authority. You ready? He asked. Malik nodded, setting his notebook on the workbench. I've been ready. Daniels smiled faintly. Good. Because what we're doing here isn't about just winning debates. It's about surviving them. He placed his thermos down and unfolded a few sheets of paper. Let's start with what they'll never teach you at Fairview. Malik listened closely as Daniels began pacing slowly, his voice deliberate. Rule 1. Never confuse volume for conviction. They'll expect you to be emotional. They'll use every tremor in your voice as proof you're unstable. So you stay calm, even when you're bleeding inside. Malik nodded, writing it down. Rule 2, Daniels continued. They'll interrupt you subtly, politely, with words like clarify or elaborate. Don't rush to fill the silence. Let them sit in it. Make them uncomfortable with your stillness. Malik paused, pen hovering. You really think silence can do that much? Daniels smiled. Son, silence is a weapon. Used right, it makes the other side reveal who they really are. Malik thought about that, his hand tightening around the pen. He remembered how the judges had stared when he'd paused on stage, how the room had gone still, unsure of whether to laugh or listen. He'd thought that moment was weakness. Maybe it wasn't. For weeks they trained every evening. Malik came straight from school, still wearing his uniform shirt, sleeves rolled up, his backpack slung carelessly in a corner. Daniels drilled him in presence before argument. Debate isn't war, he said one night, circling Malik as the boys stood at an imaginary podium. It's theater. They already wrote your script for you, the angry black boy who takes it too personally. Your job is to rewrite it before they finish reading. He'd stop Malik mid-sentence, pointing out the smallest things, an extra breath, a flicker of irritation, a hesitation before saying certain words. Right there, he'd say. That's the moment they'll pounce on. Don't give them that pause. Sometimes he made Malik start over, sometimes 10 times. At first, Malik hated it. But then, something started changing. His tone steadied, his stance grew firmer. He learned when to lift his chin, when to lower it, when to let silence stretch just long enough to feel intentional. In the stillness between words, he found something he'd never felt before. Control. One evening, after nearly 3 hours of practice, Daniels finally nodded with satisfaction. You're learning, he said. Now you're not reacting to their expectations. You're manipulating them. Malik wiped sweat from his forehead, exhausted but proud. Feels different. Daniels poured 2 cups of coffee, handing one to him. That's because you're not asking to be heard anymore. You're demanding it. Malik took a slow sip, the bitter warmth grounding him. Did you ever do this? Debate? Daniels chuckled. Back when the rules were sharper and the rooms smaller, I was the first black coach to take a team to nationals in this district. We won the opening round, then lost the next one we were supposed to win. What happened? He looked away. They changed the scoring rubric mid-tournament. Said my student lacked decorum. Malik frowned. You mean he was too confident? Daniels met his eyes. Exactly. The silence that followed was heavy, but not hopeless. You see, Malik, Daniels said softly, they'll always have unwritten rules. You can't break them until you learn how to read them. As weeks passed, Malik's confidence grew. His mother noticed it too. You've been coming home later, she said one night over dinner. What are you working on? Training, Malik replied. With a coach. Her eyebrows lifted. Fairview finally giving you proper support? He hesitated. Not exactly. Someone outside school. She studied him for a long moment. You trust him? He nodded. Yeah, I think so. She smiled faintly, though worry flickered behind her eyes. Good. Just be careful who you give your trust to. Some people see your light and only want to dim it. I know, Malik said, but this feels different. She didn't argue. She just reached over and squeezed his hand. The next Saturday, Daniels pushed Malik harder than ever. Today we test composure, he said. I'll play the judge. You'll deliver your argument while I interrupt you. No notes, no restart. Malik took a deep breath and began. The topic they'd chosen, the myth of meritocracy in education. He spoke with precision, each point anchored by fact, but layered with quiet fire. Daniels interrupted mid-sentence, cutting him off with the sharp, patronizing tone of a judge too sure of himself. Excuse me, young man, he said. You're getting emotional. Please keep your argument academic. Malik stopped, steadying his breath. I'm sorry, he said calmly, but emotion is the human response to injustice. I'd argue that ignoring it is the opposite of academic integrity. Daniels's eyes gleamed. Good. You turned it back on me. Now again, stronger. They practiced for hours until Malik's voice carried a quiet, disciplined power. When they finally stopped, Daniels leaned back, grinning. You're ready. Ready for what? He took a slow sip from his thermos. For when they try to break you again. The following Monday, Malik walked through Fairview's halls differently. He didn't look down anymore. He didn't rush past conversations. When students whispered, he didn't shrink. He'd learned to meet their eyes. Not with defiance, but with stillness. Even Mrs. Turner noticed. You seem more confident lately, she said after class, her voice tinged with curiosity. I've been practicing, Malik replied simply. That's good, she said, though her eyes searched him for something else, something she couldn't name. Keep it up. Regionals are around the corner. I'm sure everything will sort itself out. Malik didn't answer. He just nodded and walked away, leaving her standing there, her polite smile faltering. That evening, Daniels handed him a small envelope. This came for you, he said. From the regional committee. Malik tore it open eagerly. His eyes scanned the letter once, then again, disbelief spreading across his face. What is it? Daniels asked. They reinstated me, Malik said quietly. Fairview's alternate slot now confirmed for competition. They said the review found no misconduct. Daniels grinned. Then it's official. You're back in the ring. Malik exhaled, laughing under his breath. Finally something fair. But as he read the bottom of the letter, his smile faded. There was a note in smaller print. Due to concerns about coaching influence, all external mentorship is to be disclosed immediately. Daniels's grin stiffened. They're coming for me. Malik looked up. What do you mean? They did the same thing years ago. Accused me of biasing my own students. It's how they pushed me out of the circuit. Malik's throat tightened. They can't do that again. Daniels folded the letter carefully, eyes steady but tired. They already have. They'll call it protocol. 2 days later, an email from the school confirmed it. Urgent. External coaching violation review. Mr. Daniels is not an approved coach under Fairview regulations. Continued mentorship under his supervision may result in disqualification from regional competition. Malik stared at the screen, pulse pounding. He went straight to Mrs. Turner's classroom after hours, letter in hand. I don't understand, he said. This isn't against the rules. She looked at him with a carefully measured sigh. It's not written in the rules, Malik. But some standards are implied. His voice broke through the calm. Implied for who? Mrs. Turner hesitated, her silence louder than any answer. Finally, she said, I warned you, Malik. You're making people uncomfortable. He laughed bitterly. That's what truth does. She looked down. I'm sorry. For what? For what's coming. That night, Malik went to the garage. Daniels was already there, waiting, the same calm look on his face. But something in his eyes had changed. They called me today, he said quietly. Told me to stop meeting with you. Malik felt the air leave his lungs. So that's it? You're giving up? Daniels looked at him. Steady. I didn't say that. But we can't meet here anymore. Then where? He smiled faintly. Some truths don't need walls. We'll find a way. Malik nodded slowly, the weight of betrayal and defiance clashing in his chest. He had learned to speak. Now he was learning what it cost. Outside, thunder rumbled across the Ohio sky, the storm rolling in fast. And inside the garage, under the flickering light, Malik whispered, "They can't silence both of us." But neither of them noticed the shadow moving past the cracked window. The shape of someone listening, phone in hand, recording everything. The storm that had rolled in that night never really left. By morning, Fairview's halls carried a strange tension. Quiet, expectant, the kind that made whispers sound louder and footsteps echo longer. Malik could feel it in the air. Something was off. He'd spent the weekend training in secret with Mr. Daniels, meeting in the back of an old church basement, after the school had threatened to disqualify him for outside coaching. Each session was quieter, more discreet, like a rebellion whispered between generations. Now, standing outside the school computer lab with his flash drive in hand, Malik felt the familiar hum of nerves. The state-level competition was just one day away. Tonight was supposed to be final prep, printing notes, polishing rebuttals, uploading everything to the shared Fairview team system. When he logged in, his fingers trembling slightly. The screen loaded slowly, too slowly. Then, just as the folder appeared, his stomach dropped. The debate file, his entire argument, annotated sources, counterpoints, everything was gone. He blinked. Refreshed. Checked again. Still gone. The screen now showed only one folder. Approved submissions, Fairview debate. Inside, every other student's file was neatly labeled. Chad's, Ava's, Logan's, all intact. Except his. Malik's first thought was that it had to be a glitch. He opened the browser history. Nothing. Tried the file search tool. Still nothing. Then he opened the drive's recent changes tab and froze.
The file hadn't just been deleted. It had been removed by admin privileges.
Someone had erased it deliberately. His throat tightened. He grabbed his flash drive, sprinted to the IT office down the hall. Inside, Mr. Bennett, the school's technology coordinator, sat behind a wall of screens, sipping coffee and typing lazily. He looked up when Malik appeared. "Hey Malik, something wrong?" "My debate file," Malik said breathlessly. "It's gone. From the shared system. I had it there last night. It's completely erased." Mr. Bennett frowned, swiveling his chair toward the main monitor. "Okay, let's see." He typed for a while, humming softly. The rhythmic click of keys filled the silence. Then he leaned back, squinting. "There's no trace of it," he said finally. Malik's heart dropped. "What do you mean, no trace?" "No log entries, no deletion record. Could have been overwritten. Could have been a sync issue. You sure you uploaded it to the right folder?" "I've been using that folder all semester," Malik said, his voice rising. "I even saved an update last night. Someone removed it." Mr. Bennett gave him a sympathetic smile, the kind that wasn't really sympathy at all. "I'll file a report, but I can't promise much. These things happen sometimes. Technology's unpredictable." Malik stared at him. "It's not the technology that's unpredictable." Mr. Bennett didn't respond. He just clicked another window and said, "Sorry, kid. Wish I could help." Malik turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind him, with a soft thud that sounded like finality. He went straight to Mrs. Turner's classroom. She looked up from her desk, startled by his abrupt entrance. "Malik?" "My debate file's been deleted," he said, "completely wiped from the school system. It says there's no record of it." She frowned, standing slowly. "That's strange. Are you sure you did?" "I didn't delete it," Malik said, cutting her off. "Someone else did." She sighed softly, the same tone she used when a student complained about unfair grades. "Malik, I understand how stressful this is, but these things happen. Files get misplaced. Systems glitch." "It wasn't a glitch," he said sharply. "Every other student's file is still there." Mrs. Turner hesitated. "Maybe someone accidentally overwrote it." He shook his head. "Accidentally? It said admin privileges. That means staff access. Her eyes flickered for a split second, too fast for most to notice. But Malik saw it, a brief flash of something between discomfort and guilt. "I'll look into it," she said finally. "In the meantime, you should try to recover what you can. We still expect you to compete tomorrow." "That's it?" he asked, his voice hollow. "You'll look into it?" "Malik," she said gently, "you can't control everything. Focus on what you can." He turned away before she could finish. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "You all make sure I can't." That night, Malik sat in his room surrounded by scraps of paper and half-erased notes. The floor was littered with crumpled pages. His laptop hummed weakly, open to a blank document. He tried to rewrite his argument from memory, every statistic, every reference, every phrase he'd perfected with Daniels. But the words came slower this time. His brain felt foggy, his hands stiff. Hours passed, midnight came and went. Outside, rain started again, tapping against the window like a ticking clock. By 2 a.m. his eyes burned. His head ached. The speech was incomplete, rough around the edges, nowhere near the precision he'd built before. He leaned back in his chair, exhaustion pulling at his chest. His mother's voice echoed faintly from earlier in the week. "You can't let them teach you to disappear." He rubbed his eyes, forced himself upright, and whispered, "They're not going to erase me." He worked until the first light of dawn touched the blinds. When he finally stood, the new version of his speech was printed, dog-eared, and trembling in his hands. At school, he walked through the doors with heavy eyes, but a straight spine. Students crowded the hallways, buzzing about the state-level competition. Some looked at him with mild curiosity, others with quiet amusement, like watching someone who didn't know his story had already been written. Chad was there, leaning casually against a locker, surrounded by his usual entourage. He smirked when he saw Malik. "Hey Henderson," he said. "Ready for round 2? Malik kept walking. "Don't take it so hard, man," Chad added with a laugh. "Maybe the judges will give you points for effort." Malik stopped just long enough to look him in the eye. "You ever wonder what effort looks like when the system's rigged?" Chad blinked, caught off guard. Then he smiled, slow and smug. "No, because it's never been rigged against me." He walked away, laughter trailing behind him. By late afternoon, Malik boarded the school bus, bound for the state qualifiers. The trip felt endless, gray highways stretching between towns, the hum of the engine drowning out every thought. He sat alone, his notebook open on his lap, reading and rereading his reconstructed speech, until the words blurred together. Mrs. Turner stood at the front of the bus, clipboard in hand, giving last-minute reminders about decorum and time limits. When her gaze swept briefly over Malik, she gave a small, polite nod, neither encouragement nor disdain, just acknowledgement. He stared out the window. The sky was the same dull gray as the day his rejection letter had come. The competition venue was a sprawling civic auditorium in Columbus, bright lights, velvet curtains, and rows of chairs filled with students from across the state. The Fairview team gathered near the stage, nerves buzzing. Malik slipped backstage to review his notes one last time. His heartbeat echoed in his ears. 5 minutes. A volunteer called out. He took one final breath and stepped toward the podium. As the lights hit him, the murmur of the audience faded into a low hum. The stage felt enormous. Every sound, the shuffle of papers, the click of a pen, seemed amplified. And then, he saw them. Front row, center, Mrs. Turner, Miss Greer, and next to them, Mr. Kessler, the senior judge from regionals, the one who had said, "He's good for a kid like him." Mr. Kessler sat with his arms folded, his expression unreadable, but his eyes said everything. This wasn't just evaluation, it was surveillance. Malik's pulse quickened, his throat felt dry. Behind him, a stage assistant whispered, "You're up." He stepped forward, gripping the podium, his freshly printed notes trembling in his hand. The audience waited. The lights blazed white. And from the front row, Mr. Kessler leaned to Miss Greer and muttered something that made her smile faintly and nod. Malik didn't hear the words, but he didn't have to. He already knew. They weren't here to watch him win. They were here to watch him fail. The lights were blinding. Malik blinked hard as he adjusted the microphone, the thin metal stand wobbling slightly under his hand. His notes trembled, not from fear this time, but from something deeper, a pulse of resistance that no audience glare could extinguish. The stage felt like another world, The polished wooden floor, the velvet curtains, the faint scent of perfume and freshly printed programs, all of it clashed against the raw pulse of his heart. The moderator's voice cut through the tension. Next debate pairing, Fairview High versus Brookmont Academy. Topic: Equality in Modern America. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The title itself was a provocation, loaded, political, and precisely the kind of topic that split rooms in half. Malik looked to his right. Chad Whitmore was already in position, posture perfect, grin confident. His tailored blazer gleamed under the lights. His parents sat in the front row, right beside the panel of judges. They looked proud, expectant, comfortable, and sitting only a few seats away from them, Mrs. Turner and Miss Greer, whispering quietly to each other. Behind them, Mr. Kessler, the senior judge, adjusted his tie with a smirk that only Malik seemed to notice. The moderator gestured toward Chad. Mr. Whitmore, as affirmative speaker, you'll begin. Chad nodded and stepped forward, his every movement rehearsed, polished, confident. He looked out at the audience like a performer stepping onto a familiar stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice smooth and resonant. Equality in modern America is not just an ideal. It's a reality we've fought hard to achieve. Opportunity exists for anyone willing to work for it. His words flowed easily, rolling off his tongue like something memorized from a textbook. He gestured broadly, quoting statistics about scholarships, diversity programs, success stories. When we talk about inequality, Chad continued, we're often talking about mindset. It's not about what America gives, it's about what individuals take. The ladder's there for everyone. You just have to climb it. Applause broke out from parts of the audience. Parents, sponsors, and a few students nodding along. Malik sat quietly, hands folded on the table, expression unreadable. But inside, his stomach churned. He had heard that tone before, the certainty of someone who'd never had to question whether the ladder even reached their ground. When the moderator nodded toward him, Malik rose slowly. His legs felt heavy, but his voice when it came was steady. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his tone lower, quieter, drawing the audience in. I don't have numbers or headlines to prove that equality is still a dream. I have lived it. The murmurs stilled. I've walked into rooms where people laughed before I spoke. I've been told I was lucky to be there, as if presence was a prize, not a right. He paused, glancing at the judges' table. Equality in modern America isn't a fact. It's a performance, and some of us are never given the script. The audience shifted uneasily. Mrs. Turner looked down at her clipboard. Chad leaned back, arms folded, his smirk fading slightly. Malik continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. We love to talk about hard work, about merit, about personal responsibility. But merit means nothing when the system decides who gets to define it. The ladder my opponent mentioned, some of us start climbing while others are still building the rungs. A few gasps rippled through the room. Malik let the silence linger just long enough to feel deliberate. Equality isn't just opportunity, it's access. And access isn't free. Some of us pay for it with silence, others with dignity. He looked directly at the audience now, eyes clear and unwavering. So when we say modern America, ask yourself, who gets to define modern? Who gets to feel equal? He stepped back from the podium. Thank you. The applause that followed wasn't immediate. It came slowly, almost reluctantly, but it grew, wave after wave, until even the moderator's attempt to call for order couldn't drown it out. Chad's jaw tightened. He stepped back up for rebuttal, his voice sharper now, the charm replaced with irritation. My opponent speaks emotionally, he began, emphasizing the word emotionally, like an accusation. But emotion doesn't make fact. The America he describes is not the one I know. My parents came from humble beginnings. They worked hard, saved, sacrifice. That's what this country rewards. Effort. He turned toward Malik. To suggest otherwise is to say effort doesn't matter. That success is predetermined. And that's not just untrue. It's unfair to everyone who has earned their place. A smattering of applause followed, louder this time. Chad smirked slightly, looking back toward the judges, confident he had regained control. Malik exhaled slowly. When it was his turn again, he didn't rush to the microphone. He let the noise settle, the room breathing with him. I admire my opponent's story, Malik said finally, but privilege isn't always loud. It's often invisible to the people who benefit from it. He glanced at the crowd. When you say effort is all that matters, you erase the fact that some people's effort is worth less before it even begins. You say success is about sacrifice, but some of us have been sacrificing for generations just to be seen. He stopped, locking eyes with Chad. You say I'm emotional. Maybe I am. Because I'm debating a system that teaches me to justify my existence politely. A quiet gasp broke through the back row. I'm not asking for pity, Malik said. I'm asking for honesty. If equality were real, this debate wouldn't still be necessary. He lowered his notes, stepped away from the microphone, and walked back to his table. The audience didn't move. For a few seconds it was pure weighted silence. Then, softly at first, came applause, gentle but genuine. Backstage, Malik stood alone, while the judges conferred. He stared down at his hands, still trembling. He didn't know if he had won or lost. But for the first time, that didn't feel like the point. Chad brushed past him with a tight smile. Nice speech, he said. You almost made them believe it. Malik looked up. Almost? Chad leaned in slightly. Truth doesn't win these things, Malik. Presentation does. And between us you still look like you don't belong here. He patted Malik's shoulder and walked off. Malik didn't react. He just watched Chad disappear through the curtains and whispered to himself, maybe not today. Minutes later, the moderator returned to the stage with an envelope in hand. Thank you, competitors, she said, smiling tightly. Our judges have reached a decision. The audience hushed. In second place, Fairview High School, Malik Henderson. A smattering of polite applause. A few hesitant cheers. Malik's heart sank, though he'd expected it. And in first place, Brookmont Academy, Chad Whitmore. The room erupted. Chad stood, grinning wide, shaking hands with the judges. Cameras flashed. His parents clapped loudly in the front row. Malik stayed seated, his paper still in his hand, the words of his speech trembling against his skin like they wanted to escape again. Then he caught it, the look exchanged between Mrs. Turner and Mr. Kessler. A slight nod, a knowing glance. It was confirmation of something he hadn't dared say aloud. This had never been about words. It had been about control. When the ceremony ended, Malik slipped outside into the cold night air. The parking lot buzzed with celebration. Students taking selfies. Teachers congratulating winners. He walked alone toward the bus, his shoes crunching against the wet pavement. The streetlights glowed yellow against the mist. Behind him, he heard footsteps. It was Mrs. Turner. Malik, she called softly. You should be proud of yourself. He turned, eyes tired but clear. For what? For speaking with integrity. He almost laughed. Integrity doesn't get trophies. Her face softened. Sometimes it does. Just not right away. He looked at her, the words of gratitude on his tongue. But then he noticed something. In her hand was a folder. His folder. The label read, Fairview Internal Review. Debate Conduct. Is that about me? He asked quietly. She froze. Malik, you need to trust the process. He stared at her for a long moment. That's what everyone says before they bury the truth. Without another word, he turned and boarded the bus. As the engine rumbled to life, Malik sat by the window, the night outside sliding by in blurred streaks of light. The reflection staring back at him didn't look defeated. It looked resolved. He pulled out his phone, opened a new note, and began typing. If truth can't win in their arena, I'll build my own. Just as he finished typing, a new message appeared. No sender, no subject. He opened it. They made sure you'd lose. But they didn't realize people were recording. Malik's breath caught. He scrolled down. Attached was a video file labeled, Fairview Judge's Room, off record. He stared at the screen, heart pounding. Someone was watching the watchers. The bus ride home was silent, but Malik's mind wasn't. That video file sat in his inbox like a ticking clock. The name Fairview Judge's Room, off record, glowed on his screen, daring him to open it. He waited until the bus turned onto his street before pressing play. The video was grainy, recorded from a hidden camera angled slightly upward, like it had been set under a table. At first he heard only faint rustling, then voices. Whitmore's delivery was solid, a man said. It was unmistakably Mr. Kessler. Classic polish, confident, media-friendly. Another voice chimed in, a woman's Ms. Greer's, and Henderson, strong points, but too emotional. We can't reward that tone. It reads, aggressive. Someone else chuckled. Yeah, he's good for his background. But you know how this looks on camera. A silence, then a laugh that cut sharper than any insult. Besides, Mr. Kessler added, his kind of story stirs the wrong headlines. Let's keep the message clean. The clip ended there. Malik stared at his screen, every word echoing through him like static. His breath came shallow, shaky, too emotional. His background, the wrong headlines. They hadn't just disqualified his argument. They'd disqualified him. He didn't sleep that night. He replayed the video again and again until dawn, the voices looping like a cruel lullaby. By morning, his anger had sharpened into purpose. He uploaded the clip anonymously to a small debate forum under the title, "What Fairness Sounds Like." He didn't expect much. Maybe a handful of people would watch it, shake their heads, and move on. But by lunchtime it had over 10,000 views. By evening, it had 1 million. It started on Twitter, short clips of his debate circulating with captions like, "This kid dismantled privilege in under 5 minutes. Black student exposes the myth of equality." And they still gave him second place. They wanted him silent. Instead, he went viral. The clip of his closing line, "If equality were real, this debate wouldn't still be necessary," became a rallying cry. TikTok edits, reaction videos, think pieces. Malik Henderson was suddenly a name people knew. And not just his school. The world. By the next morning, news crews were parked outside Fairview High. Students crowded the gates, phones in hand, whispering his name like it was gossip and prophecy all at once. Inside, the halls buzzed with contradiction. Some classmates clapped him on the back. "You're a legend, man." Others kept their distance, eyes cold. "Can't believe you leaked that." Even Andre, his old friend, looked conflicted. "Bro, it's crazy what's happening," he said quietly at his locker. "You're trending everywhere." Malik tried to smile. "Guess people finally heard me." Andre hesitated. "Just be careful. They don't like being embarrassed." By third period, the principal summoned him. Principal Reeves was a tall, balding man, with a politician's smile, wide, empty, trained for crisis management. He gestured for Malik to sit. "You're quite the celebrity this morning." Malik didn't respond. Reeves folded his hands. "We've received several calls from the district. Reporters are contacting the school nonstop. Everyone wants a statement." "Then tell them the truth," Malik said. "The truth," Reeves repeated, his tone cooling. "Malik, the truth is complicated. The judges weren't representing the school. We're not responsible for what they said." "So you're not responsible for racism?" Reeves sighed, forcing a chuckle. "Careful with that word. It's heavy. Misused, it can destroy reputations." Malik met his gaze. "So can silence." The principal leaned back, his smile fading. "I'm advising you to stay humble. Don't turn this into a crusade. The internet moves fast. This will blow over if you let it. And if I don't, then you'll find yourself isolated." There it was, the threat wrapped in professional tone. Malik stood slowly. "Then I guess I'll get used to being alone." By afternoon, his face was on national news. Teens debate speech sparks outrage. High school student challenges America's illusion of equality. Too emotional. Judges under fire for controversial comments. TV hosts debated whether his speech was inspiring or divisive. Comment sections erupted. Half praise, half poison. One pundit said, "He's passionate, but he doesn't understand the system he's criticizing." Another countered, "That's the point. He's living the system." Supporters flooded his DMs. College students, activists, strangers saying his words gave them hope. But the hate came too. "You're race baiting. Stop playing the victim. Go back to studying instead of whining." Each message cut differently, but none surprised him. He'd always known that truth came with backlash. He just hadn't expected it to feel this heavy. That night, his mother sat beside him on the couch, the TV flickering in front of them. Her eyes were tired, her expression caught between pride and fear. "You did something big," she said softly. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Maybe you didn't," she said. "But sometimes truth decides its own reach." He glanced at her. "People are calling me a symbol." She smiled faintly. "Symbols scare people. They can't argue with them, so they try to erase them." He nodded slowly, the words settling deep. "They already tried that once." Carla reached over, squeezing his hand. "Just remember, fame doesn't protect you. It makes you visible. And visibility is dangerous for boys like you." Her warning stayed with him long after she went to bed. By midnight, his notifications had exploded again. Hundreds of messages per minute. Malik sat at his desk scrolling through headlines, watching his name spread like wildfire. And then, buried between dozens of congratulations and interview requests, a new message appeared. From unknown sender. Subject: "We know what you did." He froze. The email's body was short, written in all caps. "Admit it before we do. Your speech wasn't original." Attached was a single link. Malik hesitated before clicking it. A web page opened to a video, an old debate from 5 years earlier. A black student delivering a speech with eerily similar phrasing to his own. The caption below the video read, "Did Malik Henderson plagiarize his viral speech?" His pulse spiked. His hands trembled on the mouse. The similarities were undeniable. Lines about merit as performance, silence mistaken for peace. He'd written them from memory, from his own lived experience. But what if some phrases had unconsciously echoed what he'd seen years ago online? Panic crept in. The email pinged again. "We're sending this to the press tomorrow. Let's see how honest you really are." By morning, his phone was already ringing. "Malik, this is Ava from the Courier. Can you comment on the plagiarism allegations?" He hung up. Another call came. Then another. His inbox flooded with subject lines like "hero" or "fraud." Truth turns tainted. From inspiration to imitation. By lunchtime, the same news anchors who had praised him the night before were dissecting his credibility. Was his authenticity an act? Is this what happens when social media turns students into activists? The clip of his speech still trended, but now it was accompanied by split screens and hashtags, like "debate scandal" and "fake activist." Even the comments under his original video had turned sour. Knew he was just performing. Another fraud playing the victim. So much for integrity. Malik sat alone in the cafeteria, the noise around him blurring into white static. His tray sat untouched. Every glance felt heavier than words. Andre approached quietly, sliding into the seat across from him. "Man, I saw the posts. You okay?" Malik didn't answer. Andre exhaled. "Look, I know you didn't copy anything. Even if some lines sound similar, it's your story. But people don't care about truth online. They care about drama." Malik finally looked up. "Then I guess I just became both." Andre frowned. "Don't say that." Malik leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I gave them my voice, and now they're using it to drown me." After school, the principal called another meeting. This time Mrs. Turner and Miss Greer were already there. "Malik," Reeves began, "until this situation clears up, the district recommends you refrain from all public appearances or interviews. You're representing Fairview after all." Mrs. Turner nodded solemnly. "This is for your own good." "My own good," Malik repeated. "Or the school's image." No one answered. He looked at Mrs. Turner. "Do you believe I plagiarized it?" Her pause was just long enough to be an answer. "It doesn't matter what I believe," she said softly. "What matters is how it looks." Malik stood, the chair scraping against the tile. "Then maybe that's the problem. You all care more about how it looks than what it is." He walked out before anyone could stop him. That night, the online noise became deafening. News outlets replayed side-by-side clips of the two speeches. Commentators debated whether the coincidences were proof of theft or inspiration. Malik turned off his phone. But even in silence, the words followed him. Plagiarist. Fake. Liar. He stared out the window at the empty street, his reflection faint in the glass. Then a notification blinked on his dark screen. One new email from the same anonymous address. "You want the truth? Meet me tomorrow. Bring your laptop." Below it, an address. Malik read it twice. It wasn't random. It was the Fairview High Faculty Building. The next morning, Malik woke to the sound of his phone vibrating relentlessly on the nightstand. The gray light of dawn filtered through his blinds, slicing the room into pale stripes. He rubbed his eyes and reached for the device. But before he could read the notifications, a headline flashed across the lock screen. "Fairview student accused of debate plagiarism." The air seemed to leave the room. He unlocked the phone with trembling fingers. Dozens of alerts flooded his screen. Twitter mentions, emails, text messages. Someone had posted screenshots claiming to show portions of Malik's speech lifted word for word from the 5-year-old video he'd seen the night before. The images were convincing, too convincing. His name appeared in file metadata, timestamps aligning perfectly with the original speech's phrasing. A thread under the post read, "So much for honesty. He called out bias but stole someone else's work. Guess he learned how to play the victim well." Another fraud exposed. By the time he reached the end of the thread, his stomach churned. His own classmates had joined in. Some defended him weakly, cautiously, but most didn't. At school, the tension was suffocating. Whispers followed him down the hallway. Every phone camera he caught pointed in his direction, lowered a second too late. The same students who once congratulated him for speaking truth to power now looked at him like he was a headline, something to analyze, not a person to understand. Andre found him by his locker, voice hushed. Bro, you saw what's going on, right? I saw him, Malik said. Andre held out his phone. It's everywhere, man. They're saying the file came from your own school account. It's got your upload ID on it. That's impossible, Malik replied sharply. I didn't upload anything. Andre looked conflicted. Then someone framed you. Malik stared at him, jaw tight. You think I did it? No, come on, man, not me, Andre said quickly. But you gotta understand, people believe what looks real. And right now, it looks bad. That word hung in the air. That was all it ever took in Fairview for perception to become truth. By noon, the principal's voice came over the intercom. Malik Henderson, please report to the main office. The sound of his name in that sterile tone made his heart pound. Every head turned as he walked out of the classroom. Inside the office, Mrs. Turner was already there, standing beside Principal Reeves and Miss Greer. The air felt rehearsed, like a scene waiting for its final line. Malik, Reeves began, gesturing for him to sit. We've reviewed some serious allegations concerning your recent debate performance. Malik remained standing. Allegations based on fake screenshots. Reeves sighed. The evidence circulating online includes data from your school account. Then someone hacked it, Malik said. You've seen how easily they've gone after me before. Miss Greer folded her arms. Malik, we understand you're under a lot of pressure, but we have to take integrity seriously. The district has asked us to suspend your eligibility pending review. Malik stared at her, disbelief flooding him. Suspend me? For something I didn't do? It's not a punishment, Reeves said, his tone softening falsely. It's protocol.
Protocol, Malik repeated.
When I was humiliated at regionals, there was no protocol. When my file got deleted, no protocol. But the moment someone lies about me, now there's protocol. Mrs. Turner looked down. Malik, please. Let's just give this time. He turned to her. You know me. You know I didn't do this. Her silence told him everything he needed to know. Reeves handed him a folded paper. Effective immediately, you're suspended from all debate-related activities until further notice. Malik took the letter, staring at the inked words that blurred under his shaking hand. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. You're not suspending me for what I did. You're suspending me for what people believe. He left before they could respond. That night, the house was quieter than usual. His mother had seen the news. She didn't need to ask. She set a plate of food on the table, untouched by either of them. What do they say now? Malik shrugged. Everything. Nothing. You know you didn't steal anything, she said firmly. We both know that. That's not enough, Malik whispered. They don't care about what's true. They care about what fits their story. Carla sat beside him, her voice soft but edged with sorrow. You're learning how the world works faster than I wanted you to. He looked down, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Every time I try to speak, they find a way to turn my voice into something dirty. Then speak louder, she said. Malik looked at her, eyes tired. What if they already decided not to listen? She reached over, touching his hand, then find someone who would. The next day, Malik met Mr. Daniels behind the old church where they'd trained. The wind was sharp, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and fading leaves. You saw it, Malik said, pulling up the screenshots on his phone. Daniels nodded slowly. I saw. It's bad, Malik. They forged metadata, timestamps, even document IDs. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Can you prove it's fake? Malik asked. Daniels sighed. Not easily. They wiped your cloud history. The school must have given someone access to your files. Malik's chest tightened. The school. Daniels looked away, as if choosing his next words carefully. There's something you should know. Years ago, when I was coaching, the same kind of thing happened to another student. Black kid, top of his class. When he started winning too much, someone leaked a fake report saying he plagiarized. They called it coincidence. But I knew better. Malik's throat went dry. What happened to him? He transferred. Stopped debating. Stopped trusting anyone. Not him, Malik said quietly. Daniels nodded, though his expression said he feared otherwise. That evening, Malik sat in his room surrounded by silence. His laptop was open, the blue glow casting shadows across his face. He replayed the debate video. His debate, the one that had gone viral, the one everyone now said wasn't his. He watched himself speak. Each word, each pause, each breath. It was him. But something tugged at him as he reached the final seconds of the clip. He paused, rewound, watched again. Just before the end, the camera panned slightly, catching the judge's table. And there, half visible in the corner, was a reflection in the glass panel behind them. Someone holding a phone. Recording. Malik leaned closer. The figure was blurry, indistinct, but the outline of her face, the shape of her hair, it looked like Ms. Greer. His mind raced. She had access to the files. She was in the room during the debate. She's been at every meeting since this started. He opened the video editor and zoomed in, frame by frame. When the reflection sharpened just enough, he caught it. The faint glint of her name badge clipped to her blazer. Fairview Administration. Malik exhaled shakily. It was her. He sat back, realization flooding him like cold water. If he could prove this, if he could show that she'd been recording behind the scenes, manipulating files, he could expose everything. But before he could move the file to his drive, his screen flickered, then went black. He froze, heart racing. A notification appeared, a single line across the dark screen. Unauthorized access detected. File quarantine initiated. He tried to restart the laptop. Nothing. The drive whirred, then clicked, then fell silent. The video was gone. His hands trembled on the keyboard. Whoever was behind this had just wiped the last proof he had left. And as the screen stayed dark, his phone buzzed once more with a new message. From unknown. Subject, still think they'll listen to you. Below it, a single attachment. A photo. It was a shot of Malik sitting at his desk that very moment, taken through the window. His breath caught in his throat. Someone was outside. The sound of Malik's heartbeat drowned out everything. He didn't move. Couldn't. The photo on his phone glared up at him. His own silhouette framed by the glow of his laptop, taken from outside his window. He turned slowly toward the glass. Outside, the street was quiet. No movement, only the faint hum of a street lamp flickering at the corner. He stood, his pulse hammering, and walked toward the curtain. The world beyond the glass seemed still, but Malik knew better. Someone had been watching him long enough to send proof. His hands trembled as he locked the window, then pulled the blinds shut. For a long time, he just stood there, staring at the darkness behind him. Finally, he reached for his phone again. There was only one person he could call. Mr. Daniels arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't knock, he used the spare key Carla kept under the mat. Malik met him at the door, eyes wide, voice shaking. They were outside, he said. They took a picture of me. Then my laptop crashed. Everything's gone. Daniels stepped inside, calm but alert, scanning the room as if the walls might have ears. Show me. Malik handed him the phone. The older man's jaw tightened as he studied the image. All right, he said finally. Pack your laptop. We're not staying here. They left quietly, slipping through the back alley to Daniel's car, an old Ford with a broken taillight and the faint smell of coffee and chalk dust. Malik sat in the passenger seat, still clutching his dead laptop like a lifeline. Who would go this far? Malik asked as the car rumbled to life. Daniels didn't look at him. Someone with something to lose. They drove across town to Daniel's home, a modest one-story house lined with faded trophies and framed newspaper clippings from a time when he'd been celebrated instead of forgotten. Daniels cleared a space on his kitchen table and set Malik's laptop down gently. Whatever they did, he said, plugging in an external drive, it wasn't random. Files don't just vanish like that. Let's see what they left behind. He connected the drive to his own computer, launching recovery software. Lines of code began scrolling across the screen, searching for traces of deleted data. For nearly an hour, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft whirring of the fans and the occasional creak of the old house settling. Then a window blinked open. Fragments of recovered logs, file histories, and digital breadcrumbs. Daniels leaned forward, squinting. Here. Look at this. He pointed to a line of code stamped with a server tag. Brookmont Academy. Malik frowned. That's Chad's school. Daniels nodded. Exactly. Whoever forged your plagiarism evidence didn't just fake the screenshots. They routed the files through Brookmont's servers. Malik stared at the screen. So Chad did it. Daniels' expression hardened. Or someone working for him. But why? Daniels gave a humorless laugh. Because you beat him in every way that mattered, and because his father's not about to let a black kid from Fairview make his son look like a fraud. They worked through the night, gathering digital traces, IP logs, upload records, timestamps that linked the forgery to a Brookmont administrative account. Daniels printed everything, page after page of evidence. When they were done, Malik sat back, exhausted but alive in a way he hadn't felt in weeks. "This is it," he said quietly. "This proves it wasn't me." Daniels nodded. "We'll take it to the district first thing in the morning. With this much proof, they can't bury it." But the older man's voice carried something else underneath. The weight of experience that knew how truth could still be ignored. Morning came gray and restless. They met at Fairview's administrative building. Malik, in a wrinkled hoodie, Daniels in his old debate team blazer. When they entered Principal Reeves's office, Mrs. Turner was already there, and beside her, seated comfortably in a tailored suit, was William Whitmore, Chad's father. His presence hit Malik like a punch. His jaw was square, his hair perfectly combed, and his smile razor-sharp. "Mr. Henderson," Whitmore said smoothly, standing to shake his hand. "Quite a stir you've caused." Malik didn't move. Reeves cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitmore is here as a member of the district board. He wanted to be present during our review." Daniel stepped forward, placing the folder of printed evidence on Reeves's desk. "Then he's welcome to see this. It proves the forgery came from Brookmont's server, the same network registered to his son's school." Whitmore smiled faintly, as if amused. "Big accusation. Dangerous one, too." "It's not an accusation," Daniels said sharply. "It's fact." Reeves opened the folder, flipping through the pages slowly. "This is substantial," he admitted. "But before we move forward, we need to consider," Whitmore interrupted, his voice cutting through the room. "We need to consider what this means for Fairview's reputation, for the district's image." Malik's stomach turned. "You mean for your image?" Whitmore's gaze hardened. "Young man, you've already done enough damage. You leaked private footage of competition judges. You embarrassed your school. And now you're accusing a board member's child of cyber manipulation. Do you have any idea how that looks?" Malik took a step closer. "Yeah. It looks like the truth makes you uncomfortable." Reeves raised a hand. "That's enough. Both of you." The room fell silent. Whitmore straightened his tie. "I think we can all agree the situation needs to be resolved quietly. No more press. No more social media. Let's call this what it is, a misunderstanding." Malik's voice broke through the stillness. "You're asking me to lie." "I'm asking you to move on," Whitmore said coldly. "For your sake. For your future." Daniels slammed his hand against the table. "You can't silence him." Whitmore turned to him, smiling thinly. "You'd be surprised what I can do, Mr. Daniels. This is my district. My name built half these programs. You think the board will side with a disgraced ex-coach and a student under suspension?" Malik felt the words like blades. Reeves cleared his throat again. "Malik, maybe it's best to let the matter go. The media will move on soon enough. You've made your point." Malik stared at him. "My point? You think this is about attention?" Reeves' voice softened. Patronizing. "Sometimes the best way to win is to know when to stop fighting." For a long moment, Malik said nothing. Then quietly, "I don't know how to stop fighting. It's the only reason I've made it this far." He turned and walked out, leaving the folder of evidence on the desk. Daniels followed silently. Outside, the sunlight was blinding. Malik stood on the steps of the building, breathing hard. The morning air felt sharp, alive. "They're never going to listen," he said. "They'll bury it like they always do." Daniels watched him carefully. "Then maybe we stop waiting for them to listen." Malik looked at him, confused. "You wanted to speak truth?" Daniels said. "Do it. Publicly. Don't let them control the story." Malik hesitated. "If I go public with this, they'll destroy me." Daniels nodded. "Maybe. But if you don't, they'll destroy you anyway, quietly, politely, the way they always do." Malik turned away, staring out at the street. Reporters still lingered in cars nearby, waiting for a new headline. He exhaled slowly. "If they want a story," he said, "I'll give them one they'll never forget." That night, Malik sat in his dimly lit room, the glow of his repaired laptop illuminating his face. The footage from Daniels's recovery drive played on screen. The proof of forgery, the digital trail, the reflection of Ms. Greer in the glass. He pieced it all together. The deleted files, the false allegations, the manipulation of his voice. every fragment of injustice laid bare. Then he opened a new document titled The Speech They Tried to Erase. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. For hours he wrote, not as a student, not as a victim, but as a witness. Every word was sharp, deliberate, alive with truth. He didn't name names, but he didn't hide either. He spoke about systems that protected privilege, schools that silenced difference, and the cost of being seen in places that preferred you invisible. When he finished, he uploaded the full video package, his writing, the evidence, and a message. They taught me that truth has rules. I'm done following them. He hit post. And then, for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Hours later, his phone began to vibrate. First one notification, then dozens, then hundreds. The speech they tried to erase was trending nationwide. Within minutes, news outlets picked it up. Headlines blazed across timelines. Student exposes racism in debate circuit. Board member's son linked to forgery scandal. I'm done following their rules. Teen's viral post sparks national debate. Malik's name was everywhere again, but this time on his terms. In a quiet corner of his living room, his mother watched the news segment replay his post. Her eyes glistened with pride and fear in equal measure. And across town, in his dark office, Principal Reeves stared at his phone, the school's inbox filling with press inquiries, sponsors pulling out, parents demanding accountability. At the bottom of the thread, one new email appeared in his inbox. From District Board Office. Subject: Immediate investigation. Whitmore family conduct. Reeves looked pale. Meanwhile, Malik refreshed his feed again, and again, disbelief and adrenaline coursing through him. The nation was watching now. But before he could even process the flood of messages, his phone buzzed again, an unknown number. He answered, breath shaky. A voice on the other end said, low and cold, "You think you won? You just started a war you can't control." The line went dead. Malik stared at the phone, the hum of silence ringing in his ears. For the first time, he realized what truth cost, and that this was only the beginning. The night before the national debate finals, the air in Fairview buzzed like static. News vans were parked outside Malik's apartment complex, cables snaking across the sidewalk, cameras pointed at windows like open eyes. His name had become lightning, a story everyone wanted to touch but no one wanted to understand. Inside, Malik sat at the small kitchen table, his hands clasped together, his mother watching him from across the room. "Are you sure about this?" Carla asked softly. Her voice carried both fear and pride. Malik nodded slowly. "They want me quiet. I can't give them that anymore." She exhaled. "This isn't just a school anymore, Malik. This is national. People are waiting for you to make one mistake." He looked up, his eyes steady. "Then I'll give them something they can't erase." The morning of the finals, the sky over Washington, D.C. was the color of steel. The National Debate Center, a sprawling glass building that reflected both the clouds and the cameras waiting outside, looked less like a place for ideas and more like a stage for spectacle. Inside, rows of seats filled with students, teachers, parents, reporters, and judges. It was supposed to be a celebration of rhetoric, of youth eloquence, but today the air hummed with something else. Anticipation, division, fear. Chad Whitmore and his team from Brookmont Academy stood backstage, perfectly pressed suits gleaming under the lights. He scrolled through his phone, a faint smile curling on his lips as he read the headlines, still framing him as the American prodigy. Across the country, Malik Henderson's viral speech was still trending, and now, with the board investigation underway, people whispered that he'd been invited to attend as a guest observer. But no one expected him to walk on stage. He arrived alone, wearing a plain black blazer, and carrying nothing but a small folded sheet of paper in his pocket. Security guards eyed him suspiciously as he entered through the side door. "I'm here for the event," he said calmly. One of them frowned. "Participants enter through the main lobby." "I'm not a participant," Malik replied. "Not officially." The guard hesitated, uncertain, then let him through. Inside, Malik stood at the edge of the auditorium, watching the bright banners flutter above the stage. National Debate Finals. Voices of the Future. He almost laughed. The event began as scheduled. Chad and his opponent, a girl from Boston Prep, took the stage. Cameras flashed. The moderator announced the topic, merit and power in the modern age. The irony wasn't lost on Malik. He stood quietly at the back of the hall, listening as Chad began his opening argument. Every word polished, every pause rehearsed. "Merit," Chad declared, is the cornerstone of American progress. It doesn't discriminate. It rewards discipline, talent, and persistence. Applause followed. Chad smiled, his charm unshaken, his voice practiced perfection. Malik felt the paper in his pocket. His own speech, handwritten in the margins of sleepless nights. His fingers brushed over the ink, remembering every word. Daniels's voice echoed in his head. If they won't let you speak, make your own stage. He moved toward the aisle. When Chad finished his rebuttal, Malik began walking down the center of the auditorium. The crowd murmured, heads turning as he passed. By the time he reached the stage, even the moderator had stopped mid-sentence. "Excuse me, sir," the moderator said nervously. "This event is for registered participants only." Malik climbed the steps, his voice calm but carrying. "Then consider this my registration." The audience rustled with whispers. Cameras swiveled. Mrs. Turner, sitting near the front, covered her mouth. Miss Greer looked ready to faint. Principal Reeves, seated beside a line of district officials, rose halfway from his seat, but froze under the weight of every flashing camera. Malik stepped up to the podium. Chad glared, whispering under his breath, "You don't belong here." Malik met his eyes. That's what they said the first time, too. He turned to face the crowd. "Good morning," he began. "My name is Malik Henderson. Some of you know me. Some of you probably wish you didn't." A ripple of uneasy laughter. "I wasn't supposed to be here today," he continued, his voice steady. "They told me to stay home. They told me my time was over, my story too messy, my truth too loud." He paused, scanning the crowd. "But I realized something. They don't fear my words. They fear my right to stand here and say them." The room went utterly still. Malik's voice rose, sharp but controlled. "For months I've been told that debate is about ideas, not identity. That fairness lives in rules written by people who never had to question if they belonged in the room." He leaned slightly forward, his voice deepening. "But fairness doesn't exist where silence is the price of admission." A camera zoomed in. His face filled the screens, broadcasting live nationwide. "I'm not here to win a trophy," Malik said. "I'm here because I was taught that the measure of a man's worth shouldn't depend on how much polish he has, but how much truth he can carry without breaking." A few people began clapping. Others looked uneasy, unsure whether they were witnessing bravery or rebellion. Chad's expression hardened. Malik continued, each word sharper than the last. "When I was told my file was deleted, I stayed quiet. When they said I plagiarized, I stayed respectful. When they tried to make me disappear, I stayed patient." He turned toward the judge's table. "But patience is just another word for permission. And I'm done asking for that." The auditorium had fallen into stunned silence. Malik could feel every heartbeat in the room, every breath held between disbelief and awe. He took the folded paper from his pocket and opened it, the handwriting small and uneven. "This," he said softly, "is the speech they never let me give." He began to read. "We say, equality is progress, but what we mean is comfort. We say everyone has a voice, but what we mean is some voices are easier to hear. I don't want equality built on pity or fear. I want honesty. I want truth without a filter. I want classrooms that don't whisper when I speak, judges who don't measure my tone before my logic, and a system that stops calling my existence a disruption." His voice cracked slightly, raw and human. "I was taught that debate was about persuasion, but maybe it's really about permission. Who's allowed to sound credible? Who's allowed to sound angry? Who's allowed to sound American?" The crowd was silent. Then, somewhere near the back, a single person began clapping. Then, another, and another, until the entire hall was on its feet. The sound thunderous, echoing through the rafters. Malik lowered the paper slowly, his eyes wet but steady. He wasn't smiling. He didn't need to, but backstage chaos had already begun. A woman in a headset rushed toward the stage manager, whispering frantically, "He's not on the roster. That's unauthorized participation. We can't air this." Too late. The feed was live on national television. Social media had already clipped the moment, spreading like wildfire. In the control booth, an official barked orders into his headset. "Cut the mic, now." The sound died abruptly. Malik's next words were swallowed by silence. But by then, it didn't matter. The crowd's applause filled every gap. As security approached the stage, Malik stepped back from the podium. He looked out at the audience one last time and said loud enough for the cameras still recording on cell phones, "You can silence the microphone, but you can't silence the truth." The crowd erupted again. louder than before. 10 minutes later, Malik sat in a backstage corridor, flanked by 2 security officers. His heart was still racing, adrenaline flooding his veins. Mr. Daniels burst through the door, breathless. That was, son. That was history. Malik looked up, half smiling. Or expulsion. Daniels chuckled softly. Both, maybe. But they'll never forget it. Before Malik could answer, Principal Reeves entered with a face pale as paper, followed by Mrs. Turner and Miss Greer. Reeves cleared his throat. Malik, the National Committee has filed a motion to disqualify you for unauthorized participation. They're considering banning you from future competitions. Malik's voice was calm. So be it. You don't understand, Miss Greer interjected. This could affect your college prospects. Your record. My record already says what they want it to say. Malik interrupted. If truth costs me a college, then I'll start a movement instead. Mrs. Turner's eyes glistened. You did something powerful out there. But it's not over yet. Malik turned toward the sound of muffled chanting growing outside the door. The crowd of students, reporters, and viewers was gathering in the lobby, holding up signs that read, "Let Malik speak. Debate the truth." He exhaled slowly, closing his eyes. No, he said softly. It's just beginning. Outside the auditorium, the national broadcast networks were looping his speech. Commentators debated whether what he did was courageous or reckless. But for millions watching online, there was no debate left to have. They had seen what truth looked like when it refused to wait its turn. And as Malik stepped out onto the stage again, this time not as a competitor but as a voice uninvited and undeniable, the nation realized something that no rulebook could erase. He hadn't broken the system. He had exposed it. The noise outside the National Debate Center was deafening. Reporters shouted questions that blurred into one long wave of sound. Flashbulbs exploded across Malik's face as he stepped through the side door with Mr. Daniels at his side. His ears still rang from the standing ovation, and from the silence that had followed when the sound system cut his microphone. Malik, did you plan this protest? Are you aware you've been disqualified? Do you regret what you said on stage? Each question hit like hail. He kept walking. The officials had made their decision within the hour. Immediate disqualification for unauthorized participation. The phrasing was cold, bureaucratic, precise, like they wanted to erase him with paperwork. But the world outside had already decided otherwise. Across the plaza, clusters of students and activists were chanting his name, waving hand-drawn signs that read, "Let him speak," and "Truth isn't unauthorized." Someone had printed his photo the moment he stood at the podium, eyes defiant, mic dead, and the image had become a symbol overnight. Malik looked out at the crowd, his throat tightening. Daniels placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "You see that?" he said. "They can't disqualify a movement." Inside the center, the National Debate Committee met behind closed doors. The double doors muffled their voices, but Malik could still catch fragments. Protocol, discipline, precedent. Mrs. Turner stood by the hallway window, her face pale. When Malik approached, she turned quickly, eyes glistening. "They made it official," she said quietly. "You're barred from any future competitions. They're calling it a disciplinary precedent." Malik's jaw clenched. "So they're afraid it'll happen again. Afraid you'll inspire others," she corrected. For a moment she reached for his hand, but pulled back before she could touch him. "You spoke truth, Malik. Just know that sometimes truth burns everything around it before it lights the way." He nodded, but his chest felt heavy. "Then let it burn." Hours later, the footage aired on every major network. Clips of Malik's speech were replayed under bold headlines. Teen's unscripted speech sparks national reckoning. Debate committee disqualifies viral student. Fairview High at the center of controversy. On social media, the hashtags trended globally. Let Malik speak. Debate the truth. Fear of his voice. But the coverage wasn't all praise. Commentators on morning talk shows debated his actions. He violated protocol, one panelist said. There are rules for a reason. Another countered, rules that silence truth aren't rules. They're cages. And then came the worst segment, on a primetime network known for its coded hostility. A host with perfect hair and an even more polished smirk leaned forward into the camera. "What we saw was not courage," he said. "It was defiance. This young man represents everything wrong with today's culture. People thinking they can rewrite the rules just because they feel oppressed." He paused dramatically. The irony? He proved the system does work. He got his moment, didn't he? Carla watched that segment alone in the living room. Her hands shook as she turned off the TV. When Malik walked in minutes later, she didn't look up right away. "They're tearing you apart," she whispered. "Some of them don't even know your name, but they've already decided who you are." Malik sat beside her, voice low. "They've been deciding that my whole life." She turned to him then, tears in her eyes. "I'm proud of you," she said, "but I'm scared. They've made you into a story, and stories are easier to destroy than people." He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Then I'll make sure mine keeps growing." By the next day, Fairview High was surrounded by reporters. The school tried to distance itself with a carefully worded press release. "While we support the free exchange of ideas, Fairview High values decorum, respect, and adherence to established processes." The statement ended with a line that infuriated Malik most. "We are proud of all our students who demonstrate a commitment to professionalism." The word professionalism felt like a wound reopened. That was the word Mrs. Turner had used months ago, when she told him his tone was too aggressive. The same word the judges had whispered when they labeled his truth uncomfortable. Malik wanted to shout at them all. Professionalism isn't truth, it's just comfort dressed in rules. But instead he walked past the crowd and went straight to Daniel's house. Daniels opened the door before Malik could knock. "You look like a man who hasn't slept," he said. "I haven't," Malik admitted. "I keep thinking, what if they're right? What if all I did was make noise?" Daniels gestured for him to sit. "Let me tell you something about noise. You know why they hate it." Malik shook his head. "Because it means someone they couldn't control is finally being heard." "You already won, Malik. You didn't change the rules. You changed the question." Malik frowned. "What question?" "The one that keeps them comfortable," Daniel said. "They used to ask, 'Can people like you belong here?' Now, because of you, they're asking, 'Why did it take this long?'" Malik leaned back, letting the words sink in. For the first time in days, he felt something close to peace. "Thank you," he said quietly. Daniel smiled. "Don't thank me. Just keep standing." Outside, the movement had grown beyond him. Students across the country organized walkouts under the hashtag Let Malik Speak. Protesters stood in front of the National Debate Committee building, with signs reading, "Debate is dead without diversity." Universities released statements condemning the ruling. And at the center of it all, Malik's face, his defiant expression at the podium, became a poster for change. Yet with every headline, the pressure mounted. Journalists called nonstop. Activist groups reached out for statements. Everyone wanted a piece of him. He wasn't a student anymore. He was a symbol. And that terrified him. One night, unable to sleep, he stood on the balcony of the apartment, looking out at the city lights. The glow of screens from neighboring buildings made the night look like static. His phone buzzed in his hand again. Hundreds of new notifications. People arguing about him instead of with him. For the first time since it all began, Malik felt truly alone. Then, 2 days later, a knock at the door broke the stillness. Carla opened it, surprised to see a courier holding a thick envelope stamped with a golden seal. "For Mr. Malik Henderson," the man said. Malik took it, his heart thudding. Inside was a letter on embossed paper, signed with an unfamiliar name, Dr. Evelyn Carter, President, National Scholarship Foundation. He read aloud, "Mr. Henderson, the events of recent weeks have reached our attention. While controversy surrounds your methods, your courage has redefined what it means to debate truth in public discourse. The Foundation would like to formally invite you to speak at the National Symposium on Education Reform next month, where we believe your voice uncensored deserves to be heard." Malik stopped reading, his voice trembling. Carla clasped her hand over her mouth. "Oh my God," he continued, barely above a whisper. "Additionally, we are offering you a full scholarship under our Civic Leadership Grant for students demonstrating exceptional integrity and resilience in the face of systemic adversity." Tears blurred the words. He looked up at his mother, disbelief etched across his face. "They want me to speak," she smiled through tears. "Then you speak, baby. You speak for everyone they tried to silence." Malik folded the letter carefully, his hands shaking not from fear, but from something stronger, purpose. For the first time in a long while, he felt light. He had lost the stage. He had lost the title. But he had gained something that couldn't be judged or scored. A platform. That night, Malik called Daniels. "You won't believe this," he said. "They invited me to speak at the National Symposium." Daniels chuckled on the other end. "Of course they did. The world always catches up, just slower than justice." Malik smiled, leaning against the window. "Do you think I should do it?" Daniel's voice softened. Only if you plan to tell the truth again. Because that's what got you here. Malik stared at the skyline, the city glowing like possibility itself. Then I'll give them more truth than they're ready for. He didn't see the news alert flashing on his phone at that moment, a new headline breaking across every major network. National Debate Committee launches investigation into leaked files. Sabotage came from within. Malik's story wasn't over. It was about to turn everything upside down again. The morning the headlines broke, the world tilted. Across news outlets, the same story dominated every screen. Investigation confirms sabotage in Fairview debate controversy. Brookmont Academy server linked to forged evidence. District board member implicated in cover-up. Malik read the words twice, then a third time, his hands trembling. It was no longer rumor. It was truth. Official, undeniable, public. The forged files that had ruined his reputation, the whispers that had branded him a fraud, the silent campaign to erase him, every lie was now laid bare. For the first time in months, Malik didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. The district issued a formal apology. The National Debate Committee followed, releasing a statement that stopped just short of admitting complicity. Mr. Henderson's contributions to the national dialogue on inclusion and equity have inspired essential reflection within our community. We recognize that systems of bias, intentional or otherwise, must be addressed. But words alone didn't undo what had been done. Malik knew that. He'd learned that apologies often arrived when cameras were watching. What mattered now was what came next. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. This one wasn't from a foundation, or a journalist, or an activist group. It bore the gold seal of the National Debate Organization, the same institution that had once erased his name from every competition record. Carla found it first, lying on the kitchen counter, and called out to him with a tremor in her voice. Malik, it's from them. He opened it carefully, the heavy paper cracking faintly under his fingers. Dear Mr. Henderson, in recognition of your resilience, integrity, and your impact on the future of student discourse, we are pleased to inform you that your eligibility has been fully reinstated. Furthermore, we invite you to deliver the keynote address at this year's National Inclusion and Equity Summit. Sincerely, Dr. Evelyn Carter, President, National Debate Organization. Malik read the words in silence. When he finally looked up, his mother was already crying quietly, with pride that looked like relief. The summit was scheduled in Atlanta, a city that felt symbolic, a crossroads of struggle and strength. When Malik arrived, the convention center shimmered with glass and sunlight. Posters bearing his image lined the entrance. From debate to dialogue, the power of one voice. Reporters crowded the lobby, flashes popping as he stepped through the doors. But this time, the questions weren't barbed. They were reverent. Malik, what does this moment mean to you? How does it feel to come full circle? Do you believe the system can truly change? He paused before answering, choosing his words with the same precision he'd once saved for the podium. I don't believe in systems changing by themselves, he said. People change them or they don't change at all. It wasn't rehearsed. It was lived. Inside, the auditorium was massive, thousands of seats, a stage framed by towering screens. As Malik waited backstage, the hum of the crowd felt different this time. Not mocking, not expectant, just present. Daniel stood beside him, straightening his tie like an old ritual. His eyes shone with quiet pride. Remember what I told you? He said. That truth burns before it lights. Malik replied with a small smile. Daniels chuckled. Yeah! But tonight, you're the fire. Malik exhaled, steadying himself. You think they're ready? Daniels' expression softened. Doesn't matter, you are. When the announcer's voice echoed across the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Malik Henderson. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It roared. Thousands of people rose to their feet as Malik stepped into the light, the stage beneath him glowing gold from the overhead spotlights. He froze for a heartbeat, overwhelmed by the sight. Rows of faces, students, teachers, judges, board members, people who once doubted his right to stand there, now rising to honor him. It wasn't triumph that filled him. It was something quieter, deeper. Vindication, yes, but also sorrow for what it had taken to reach this point. He walked to the podium, the microphone waiting. For a moment, he didn't speak. He simply looked at them. When he finally began, his voice was calm, deliberate, and alive. Not long ago, Malik said, I stood on a different stage, a smaller one. I wasn't invited there either. I was told I didn't belong. A murmur rippled through the room. I was told that debate was about logic, not lived experience, that equality was achieved, not pursued, that fairness had rules, and those rules were not written for people like me. He paused, letting the weight settle. But here's what I learned, he continued. Truth doesn't need permission. It just needs persistence. And sometimes, persistence looks like standing up when they tell you to sit down. Applause erupted, but he lifted his hand gently to quiet them. Tonight isn't about me, he said. It's about what happens when a voice that was meant to be silenced refuses to disappear. It's about every student who was told to tone it down, every worker who was called too emotional, every child who learned that being seen meant being judged. He looked toward the back rows, where teachers and district representatives sat, eyes lowered. For a long time I thought winning meant being accepted, he said. Now I know it means being heard. The words landed like music. He continued, not with anger, but with quiet conviction. When I first walked into a debate room, I thought I had to sound like everyone else to matter. But the truth is, my difference wasn't the obstacle. It was the message. He smiled faintly. If my voice shakes, it's not weakness. It's history catching up with me. The room was silent. Cameras caught every word, every breath. And to the people who once laughed when I spoke, who doubted my place here, I want to thank you. Gasps rippled through the audience. You taught me that acceptance isn't the goal. Respect is. And sometimes, you have to demand it before the world decides you deserve it. When he finished, the audience stood again. The applause was thunderous, rolling through the hall, like a wave breaking against the walls. Malik stepped back from the podium, blinking against the bright lights. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times. None of those versions came close to this. Because this wasn't a victory. It was a reclamation. Backstage, Daniels met him with a smile that didn't need words. He simply pulled Malik into a brief, proud hug. You did it, he murmured. You didn't just speak, you changed the room. Malik nodded, still catching his breath. Feels different this time. Daniels chuckled. That's because they finally heard you. Carla stood a few feet away, tears streaming freely, her hands clasped in front of her mouth. Malik walked over and hugged her tight. You were right, he whispered. They couldn't silence me. She held him tighter. They never could. Later, when the crowd began to disperse and the lights dimmed, Malik lingered near the edge of the stage. He looked out over the emptying seats, soaking in the afterglow of applause. The echo of it still rang in the air. A reminder, a rhythm, a promise. He thought of the boy he'd been months ago, standing at a whiteboard in a classroom full of laughter. The one who dared to sign his name, beneath a list of students no one thought he belonged beside. That boy had been dismissed, ignored, erased. But this version of him standing under the soft glow of stage lights was proof that silence never wins. Then, from the corner of his eye, Malik noticed movement in the shadows of the audience. A man stood alone, hands in his pockets, watching. At first, Malik couldn't place him. Then the light shifted, and his stomach tightened. Chad Whitmore. He was older now, face tense, expression unreadable. He didn't clap. He didn't speak. He simply watched, eyes sharp, lips pressed into something that looked like resentment, or maybe regret. Their eyes met for a long, unbroken moment. Malik didn't look away. Neither did Chad. Then, without a word, Chad turned and disappeared into the crowd. The applause had ended, but its echo remained, and Malik knew what it meant. The fight wasn't finished. It had only changed form. He looked down at the stage beneath him, the same one that had once been off limits. He exhaled slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. Round 2, he said. The applause had long faded, but the echo of that night never really left. Months passed, and Malik Henderson became a name whispered in classrooms, debated in boardrooms, and studied in lecture halls, not as controversy, but as change. The viral clip of his unsanctioned speech at the national debate finals had surpassed 50 million views. It wasn't just a moment anymore. It was a movement. Teachers played it in diversity seminars. Universities cited it in essays about systemic bias. Students mimicked his tone and cadence in competitions. But Malik didn't chase the fame that followed. He built something with it. It started small. A few messages in his inbox from students. Mostly young, mostly black, mostly unheard. How did you stay calm when they doubted you? How do you speak without them twisting your words? How do you make them listen? At first, Malik tried to respond to them all individually, but soon, the messages became hundreds, then thousands. So one night, sitting at his desk in the same small apartment where it all began, he turned on his old laptop camera, leaned close to the lens, and hit record. The screen flickered to life. "Hey," he said quietly. "My name's Malik. You might have seen my story, but I want to talk about yours." He paused, letting the silence feel intentional. "When I started debating, I thought I had to sound like them to be heard. I was wrong. You don't have to erase yourself to earn respect. You don't have to soften your truth to make people comfortable. You just have to keep speaking, even when the room laughs." He leaned forward. "Especially when the room laughs." He uploaded the video to a new channel. The voice they tried to silence. By morning it had 500,000 views. Within weeks, Malik's channel became a digital classroom. He posted lessons about rhetoric and poise, but also about survival. How to breathe through prejudice. How to answer questions designed to undermine. How to use bias as a mirror instead of a weapon. Each video began with the same message. This isn't about debate. It's about being heard. And people listened. Not just students, teachers, journalists, parents, even judges from other circuits reached out privately, asking for advice on making competitions fairer. For the first time, Malik realized he wasn't just changing rules. He was changing perspectives. But the more attention he gained, the louder the resistance grew. Anonymous accounts flooded his comments. "You're making it about race again. Stop playing the victim. You're poisoning debate with politics." He ignored most of it, until one night, he recognized a familiar tone in one of the comments. "You talk a lot about inclusion. Maybe it's time you teach people how to earn their place instead of blaming the system." The username was hidden, but the phrasing, the cadence, it was unmistakable. "Chad." Malik stared at the comment for a long time. Then instead of replying, he clicked pin to top. Beneath it, he wrote, "This is exactly why we need this channel. Welcome to the conversation." The post went viral within hours. That single act, refusing to engage in anger, became another lesson. Malik uploaded a follow-up video titled "The Power of Staying." He looked into the camera, his voice even, his eyes steady. You can't argue with every insult. Some people don't want dialogue. They want distraction. But when you stay present, composed and unapologetic, you win something more important than approval. You win clarity. It wasn't just a message to his viewers. It was a message to himself. By late spring, Malik's channel had over 1 million subscribers. He used the donations to launch the Open Mic Initiative, a mentorship program connecting minority students with volunteer coaches. The first virtual session had 20 participants. The second had 2. Soon Malik was speaking to classrooms across the country, virtually and in person. Everywhere he went, he saw reflections of his younger self. Nervous voices hiding brilliance, bright minds dimmed by doubt. One afternoon, after a guest lecture at an urban charter school, a small boy approached him. He couldn't have been older than "Mr. Henderson?" the boy asked shyly. "I watched your video, the one where they tried to cut your mic." Malik smiled. "Yeah? I showed it to my teacher when she said my speech was too angry," the boy said. "She made me rewrite it. But I kept my first version too. I'm gonna read that one at the next assembly." Malik crouched to meet his gaze. "You do that," he said softly. "And when they look uncomfortable, you'll know you're doing it right." The boy grinned. "I want to debate one day. Like you." Malik's voice caught. "Then I'll be watching." That night, Malik sat on his balcony, the city lights flickering below. The air was warm, the sounds of cars distant and soft. He thought about how far he'd come, the stages, the microphones, the mistakes, the times he'd been told to lower his tone, to stay in his lane, the nights he'd rewritten speeches no one wanted to hear. He wasn't angry anymore. Just awake. Daniels called him later that evening. His voice carried that familiar mix of pride and nostalgia. "You're building something real," Daniel said. "I've been watching those videos. You've got more students learning from you than the entire district ever reached." Malik smiled faintly. "Feels strange, doesn't it? All this came from a deleted file." Daniels laughed. "Life's funny that way. They tried to erase you. Now your words are in every classroom they control." Malik grew quiet. "Do you ever think it'll stop? The bias, I mean." Daniels sighed. "Not in my lifetime. Maybe not in yours either. But it'll shift. And every shift starts with a voice that refuses to shut up. Even when they call it too loud." Especially then. They both laughed, the kind of laugh that came from exhaustion and faith in equal measure. Months later, Malik stood backstage again, this time not in defiance but in invitation. The National Debate Organization had named him their Youth Inclusion Ambassador, and he was about to introduce the first all-black team to ever compete in the national finals. He looked out through the curtain at the crowd. The same stage that had once exiled him now bore his name on the program. Carla was in the front row, smiling proudly. Daniels was there too, his hand over his heart. As Malik stepped forward to announce the new competitors, the crowd erupted into applause. He waited for it to die down, then spoke. 2 years ago, he said, a student like me walked onto this stage without permission. Tonight, 100 walk on with it. The audience rose again. The applause rolled like thunder. Malik glanced up at the lights. Somewhere he could almost see that younger version of himself. The quiet boy in the thrift store shirt, holding a paper too heavy with hope. The boy who thought no one would ever listen. He smiled softly, whispering under his breath, "They hear you now." After the event, Malik returned to his apartment, logged onto his channel, and began editing a new video. The title, "The Next Voice." He stared at the blank description box, then typed slowly, "I was laughed at once for believing my voice mattered. Now I laugh at the silence that followed me, because silence never wins. It only waits for someone brave enough to interrupt it." He hovered over the publish button, then clicked it. The video went live instantly, the comment section filling with voices, young, old, inspired, defiant. Each one was a ripple. Each ripple, a reminder. Malik sat back, closed his eyes, and listened to the faint hum of his computer. The digital pulse of a movement he never meant to start, but now couldn't stop. His phone buzzed beside him. A new message from an unknown number. "I saw your speech. My name's Elijah. I'm the only black kid in my debate team. I almost quit. Then I found your channel. Can I learn from you?" Malik smiled, typing his reply. "You already are." He hit send, then looked out the window as the night deepened, the city alive with 1,000 unseen lights. And as the screen glowed softly against his face, one thought lingered, steady, unshakable, eternal. How many more Maliks were still waiting to be heard? Some stories don't end with applause, they end with a choice. If you believe silence is part of the problem, then let your voice be part of the change. Type yes if you believe in justice, and subscribe if this story broke your heart.